It appears like we're live. Think so, anyway. Probably. Test. Yes. Yeah, I hear me. Okay. Yeah. So, same old routine, I guess. I will attempt to explain uh, why current theory is, just isn't good enough. Not even close, really. um, and why the counter theories, which are mostly ether theories, as I find. Anyway, somebody gave me a link to some Japanese guy who had a critique of quantum mechanics and relativity, and they're just a bunch of mathematical critiques that I personally find wanting. Just because it goes into all this creating an infinity or creating a less than zero or some other kind of crap, and we already, I mean, physics has already sort of acknowledged that a lot of its formulas don't work in certain circumstances. So you have to limit their applicability. And you could almost argue that, so anyway, that gave me a, so I went to one guy, and so he turns out, yeah, he's doing all these critiquing because he's ether nut. Okay, so that's his cause, is ether. So they that linked to another guy. I don't know, maybe they're both Chinese, I don't know, but they're critiquing different parts of relativity, and the one guy is picking on E equals mc squared and ends up doing it basically in a catch 22 kind of manner, like I said, kind of a bogus way, in the sense that when they factor in the relativity factor, they obviously distort E equals mc squared into equals mc squared, but prevent it from creating absolute masses or speeds greater than the speed of light. You can't move a mass to the speed of light, so it has obviously this catch in it, and that the catch creates a near rational, um, like I don't know what the right word for it would be. You don't need the mathematics to create the catch to stop it's something from happening, because the physics already stops it. So, in a sense, you don't need math to describe the fact that physics won't allow matter to go faster than the speed of light. Now, the fact that your mathematical simulation doesn't have that limitation built into it, you can't just contrive it into the math and say you've done something honest, because it's sort of dishonest. You're not really describing reality, then you're creating um, a completely fake obstacle that isn't relevant, really, or connected to the real obstacle that the real physics creates. So, in a sense, I'm just saying you can say equals mc squared and leave it alone. Don't do this relativistic crap to it. And it's an honest statement in the sense that it could be understood that your mass is essentially a description of momentum. Because the only way we say you have mass, for example, would be the fact that you can be moved by gravity, and then how much you're moved by gravity um, is completely dependent on that mass. That is, how much gravity hits you, and then how much speed you end up having is dependent on your mass. And your mass ends up being your momentum. And all you're really talking about is your momentum in a dimension, as I've often tried to explain. So you can understand that the little force bits, like a photon, yeah, they don't have any mass except on the scale, okay, where you measure them. So whichever way they're going, wherever they hit, they have a pushing force, and that's their mass. They don't have any in sideways or reverse or in some other dimension. So they don't do the up, down, left, right thing. They just do the forward thing. And they don't really do the back thing. No mass in the backward direction. And matter, you can understand, would have energy held as pressure, that is momentum in these directions. Just like I've been trying to explain that the Earth right now has trapped a bunch of energy going towards the center. And it's that energy going towards the center, the acceleration towards the center, that essentially is creating the 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 other side of the earth, where there are people just like me, well, as if not speaking the same language, or so. Anyway, those people, okay, their world, okay, the earth below them and them, they're accelerating and creating the force that's actually pushing me down. And I'm doing the same to them. And that's a real substance. And that's what gives the earth its mass, is the fact that it possesses energy. And so, well, anyway, I don't want to get into a whole defense of E equals mc squared, but I'm just saying, yes, the c squared part is irrelevant because that just has to do with how you're going to count how much energy there is. So it doesn't really matter. So it's just energy equals mass, which essentially is just saying how much mass something has really has to do with how much force it can apply. So you could argue that when somebody shoots a bullet out of a gun, you can measure the force of that bullet, how many pounds per square inch of force it can impose. So it weighs a lot in the dimension it's moving. Not going to weigh much in the sideways dimensions, but in the direction it's going, it weighs a lot because it possesses a lot of energy. And seems like that's just logical. So, yeah, I don't know what this whole bullfighting thing has shown up now. All of a sudden, it's in the comments. Now it's in the chat. I'm the, I don't know. What is that? An interesting little trolley thing? I don't think it's very interesting. This pathetic people on this earth. I just, they just keep showing up with their little fake accounts, doing this little fake thing like, oh, this is such a great accomplishment. I'm such an accomplished human. I can make stupid comments. I can waste people's time. That's really what you want to have written on your tombstone. This asshole wasted a lot of people's time. Fine, whatever. Are not speeds relative when measuring? So again, no, just think about that concept for a minute, all right? Because that's another thing that is revealed when somebody analyzes Einstein relativity, that it really doesn't make any sense because something actually has to be doing the moving, right? The real argument is it because all motion is made of the same thing, is that you can't make distinctions. Like there's a certain kind of motion and it's special in the universe. So it's basically the argument is the acceleration of the force of gravity is the same as the acceleration of a rocket, is the same as the acceleration of somebody throwing a baseball, whatever. Acceleration is acceleration is acceleration. And so what it's really just saying is because it's all the same, you can't tell which one's moving. But that doesn't mean one of them isn't moving. Okay, it just means you can't tell which one is doing it. Now, I would argue that you can tell, that whole premise is bullshit. That if you could make a light clock, the light clock would reveal your motion. Just like a speedometer, it would tell you exactly how fast you're going because the light would be constant. It would move the speed of light and it would move in a straight line direction. So it would tell you essentially the faster you're going, the more it would appear that the light is trailing behind you, so to speak. You would see the light bend because the light would be going straight and you would be moving the targets. But I'm just saying that even if you believe this relativity stuff, you still have to concede that one of the two objects is doing moving. It's not like nothing is moving. Something is moving. You just can't tell which one relative to which one is going which way at what speed. But it's not that something doesn't have speed. It's that you can't tell which one has speed relative to an absolute frame. And it doesn't even say there's no such thing as an absolute frame, because that would be ridiculous. Because in a sense, it does kind of imply that the absolute of going the speed of light can't be broken, going faster than the speed of light. And if you could just keep putting things in frames, then you could just keep framing things until you were going 10 times the speed of light inside of a frame. And that can't happen. So I'm just saying it's measuring might be relative, but reality isn't relative. So, and obviously I'm arguing that relativity is just nonsense. It isn't relative at all. Yeah, just nonsense. You will see the non-relativistic facts. If you're the moving object, you will be affected by your velocity physically. You will change, and the world around you is not going to change, and therefore you're going to perceive it differently. Whoa. Sorry. Rough day. All right, so where was I? All right, so all these guys that I've been watching, they're all tearing something down about physics. I really don't like the way they're doing the tear down, because it's all in these little technicalities, all these little tiny mathematical, bullshitisms. And I don't think those are really great arguments against I think you need to argue the mechanics of what they're arguing and why the mechanics don't make sense, rather than arguing just mathematical gimmicks. That's not saying that they're not proposing a bunch of theory that's dependent on mathematical gimmicks, like antiparticles, borrowing energy from the future. They do a lot of cheats in their mathematics that should be called cheats, because that's what they are, huge cheats. I'm just saying they don't make very good certainly they're beyond common person understanding. So they're pretty hard to even measure whether you're making a good critique or not, because somebody has to have a minimum amount of pretty good math knowledge to do anything about any of it. So in that sense, I don't think they're practical arguments. And well, it doesn't really matter. But the point is this whole ether thing. And the ether thing kind of annoys me, just because ether does not provide a solution to the biggest problem in physics. And in my opinion, the biggest problem, the problem that sort of led me, to my pursuit of a better answer, was just this whole idea of that, this implication that gravity, we don't have to explain the energy. We can just say it happens magically. Giant things move because the magic force moves them. The non-energy force, the force that doesn't have to come from somewhere. It's just somehow bent geometry made. It's the invisible vacuum cleaner force. It's the invisible river force, the medium force. And again, it's all invisible. I mean, it's not invisible, just invisible. It's unaccounted for. There's absolutely no recognition of where it comes from. So it's kind of like, and in the case of magnetism, it's kind of like in Star Trek, this idea of your shields, right? So you create a force field around your ship. And everybody knows from Star Trek that it takes energy to have shields, right? You have to make the shield out of force. You have to project something that requires you to burn energy to create your field around you, your little bubble, your membrane. Because, in all the stories, clearly as you're losing power, your shields start to fall apart because you're losing power and you don't have the energy to keep your shields up. And it sort of works for magnetism, to understand magnetism in that sense. In the traditional, their description of it, they're basically saying a magnet creates a membrane around it. And when you move that membrane through a wire, you create perturbations, you create electricity. The shield disturbs the electrons in the material and causes them to move. And you understand that the force field doesn't really have energy, but the movement of the force field imposes the energy. But then in the case of the electromagnet, you can also understand that it's like turning on your shields when something's already near or close to you, and you're going to push it away by turning your shields on. In a sense, you're going to create the membrane, and it would push away whatever's around you, in the same kind of thing a way a magnet would too. So you can turn the shield on and off, and by turning it on and off, you're creating motion. So the point is there's a difference between having the force field around the battery and me moving the battery around. And therefore, you obviously can see the energy of moving the battery is different than the energy to create the shield. And so what I'm arguing about is that there's no accounting for the shield energy. I'm not talking about the energy to move the battery. I'm talking about the energy to create the membrane around the battery. And ether theories don't explain the creation of that membrane or that shield any better than conventional physics, in the sense there's no accounting for these two fundamental, like we deal with them every day, forces. I mean, you see this move, and you logically know that if you had to move it sideways, right? If you had to do the same thing that this just did, except you had to go that way or that way, you know you'd have to put energy in. You can't just wish it that way. You can't just say bent space, bent space. You can't just magically make it do that. There has to be energy from somewhere. Somewhere energy has to make it move this way or this way. And you just have this little weird brain thing that tells you, no, it's okay that this didn't take any energy. We don't need to account for this. But if I move it in any other direction, I'm obviously moving it in some other dimension. That's not the opposite of the gravity. Obviously, that takes even more energy to go opposite the gravity. But you just know that you can't just wish things to move. And that why are you allowing them to give you an explanation for something, movement, for acceleration, something the baseball player has to eat a bunch of food and get strong to be able to accelerate the baseball. Every other thing that gets accelerated, it's got to get accelerated because you put energy into the system. And yet for gravity, it's around you all the time. And for magnetism, you're not requiring them to explain where the energy comes from. So even if they give you this nonsense that a magnet is some sort of idiotic thing where there's crap coming out and flowing into the bottom, all the time, it's just constantly moving stuff like this. And that somehow this motion, okay, somehow compels another magnet to go flying into there, rock solid, right through all of those waves and everything else and go right into the other thing, even though there's no theory for that. And when it happens in a medium, that is when they spin something in mediums, and they move towards each other. Like I said, you can tell why that's happening is because the medium has tension in it. All the little bits of the ether are tied to each other, so to speak, the water molecules. So then you need an ether first that's elastic, that is, it's all connected. But you still have to explain where you got the energy to spin it constantly. There's no evidence that the regular magnet, not the electromagnet, just the regular magnet, is burning any energy to create a bunch of swirls around it. Even if the swirls were capable of creating something called attraction and repulsion in any kind of real sense, like anywhere near the strength of magnets, which swirly stuff would never be anything close to the strength. But even if I was to concede that somehow that's possible, that swirling crap would somehow make things attract with such force, where does the energy come to swirl? Where did the energy come from to swirl the medium? Forever. There's some little bits doing this for some reason. And you have to explain why are they doing that forever. I mean, I would argue that you can. If you want to tell me that there are some bits that are moving forever, great. Then explain where they came from in the sense of why aren't they in the ether itself? Why are they in the magnet? And how are they orbiting? What's keeping them in their orbit? Geometry again? Some magical force? So anyway, these are things that really, they just don't have any answer for. And in my opinion, that just means their theories can't be considered viable. I mean, you can't leave that out, that source of the energy. You can't leave that out of your theory and then say it's still a good theory. It's a huge absence And it also gets them out of so much trouble, because by taking the energy out of the equation, they don't have to account for things like drag, or incidental consequences. By saying some magical force did it, and the magical force only does this one thing and has no other consequences in the universe. You see how that's such an easy cop out. I can just make it exclusive to one thing. It makes one single thing happen and has no other possible implications. I mean, that's just such a free ride. And I'm surprised that all you suckers fall for that. It just sounds like, I mean, that's just such a cheat. Is anyone here using Spanish? I don't know what that means. If there are, there really shouldn't be. So there's another neutral. I don't know what all this is. Soyotopic storms must bow before El Nino. I don't know what all. Fuck you. Silly people. It's pathetically silly. All right, so let's see if there's any point in drawing some of this, but I mean, it's very hard to draw the ether and to figure out which way to go with gravity or with the magnetism example, but they're both the same example in the sense that there's no explanation for why, I mean, energy. So it's just kind of an obvious, even if I have an ether theory, how does the ether force two things to move towards each other? I mean, what's the ether theory, that says, oh yeah, they'll move towards each other? What's the mechanism? So they're always stuck by turning it into like some kind of electric thing. Okay, the Earth is, like the electric universe people, the Earth is positive and the moon is negative or some kind of crap. Somehow they have to make them into representations of magnetism, because what else do they have? They just have two things separated by distance. And they're just going to say, oh, well, they just move towards each other because they feel like it. So unless you fill this ether, unless you make the ether actually have force in it already, that is a pushing force that can be shielded, that is, it pushes all around stuff, and then you can create shadows to that force. I mean, that certainly can create low pressure between two things, and you can understand how, okay, that works. High pressure on the outside, low pressure on the inside, the two things will move towards each other. But how do you do it with this nonsense? So if they create this electric field, you can imagine a bunch of these field lines, and then you can make them all spin around. So they're all spinning in a direction here, and this is spinning this way, and this is spinning this way. And, you make a bunch of ether spinning, and yet we see no evidence of that. Absolutely not a single shred of evidence where anything is compelled to start spinning. If I put something still in these environments, nothing will start spinning. And with magnetism, there's absolutely no evidence around a static magnet that I could put something somewhere and it'll start spinning. There's no evidence of anything like that. There's no motion around the magnet. There's no force moving in any kind of spirals or out one end and coming back in the other end. There's absolutely no evidence that anything's doing that. So how is it a better explanation? How does ether help explain the most fundamental elements of physics? It doesn't help at all, because ether doesn't have any energy in it either. It's still minus the energy to move things. Ether doesn't create a flame on this side of the moon that causes the moon to shoot into the earth. It doesn't do that. It doesn't create any flame behind the earth. It doesn't do any of that stuff. So why is it people consider this a viable explanation for anything? It doesn't explain anything. All right, well, we'll do some comments. Oh, wait, hot in here. Yeah, so anyway. But I did want to, I had no script. I just had this idea that this is such a point that I just don't know why people aren't getting this. But I mean, this is a critical flaw in theory in the sense that it's not explained. It's like not explaining the existence of, I don't know, dirt. Um, I don't know how to compare it to some other theory and just how it would be such a vacuous theory if it couldn't explain these things. These fundamental elements that are so important. All right, so I guess this Philip Jackson guy was sort of annoying, so I'll read this just because it was annoying. I wasted a fair bit of time listening to another woo scientist, professor of what, where, Eric P. Dullard, who proves his credentials, not having a degree or any training, by asking the audience. I think it's just wrong to say he doesn't have any training, so that's just stupid, I think. Well, anyway, and so he's just complaining about Dullard. Yes, he's worthy of complaining, yes. Towards the end, he asserts the hypothesis, which is how our fridges and cars work, shows, yes, just Tesla crap. Okay, let's all hail Lord Tesla. Right, okay, so that's a critique of the some of the cranks out there. And some of their arguments are fairly reasonable, and some of them are really not reasonable at all. Okay, the part about clocks you could have used more effectively. I don't know how. The clock on the GPS satellite runs slower up there in the weaker part of the Earth's gravitational field. That's not how it works. I'm just saying there's two effects, special relativity, general relativity. They have an opposite impact, and the stronger impact is the fact that we're in the stronger gravity, which only means we're accelerating faster. That means we're the ones moving faster. And I've explained how you can understand that. And it's this leasing argument. We're going around the circumference of the Earth, but we're being bounced by a much more severe direction down. So we're going this way, but we're also going down and up, down and up, down and up on the surface of the Earth, essentially. So you can see that as sort of an leased line. That is the total distance we're traveling, like a basketball, right? The player is only going a certain speed. But if you calculate how fast the ball is going, the ball is going a lot faster because it has to go up and down, up and down, up and down the whole time the basketball player is moving. And we're doing the same thing. So we're bouncing very high because we're in a strong gravity. Where the satellite, although it's traveling a larger circumference, it's bouncing a lot less high. So the amount of extra distance it's traveling is a lot less than the extra distance we're traveling. So in the same amount of arc, we in fact travel much faster than the thing in space. Even though it's going 25,000 miles an hour, we're actually moving faster, our molecules, our atoms, because our atoms are being bounced in a very strong gravity. So that's the argument I'm making. And all of this is sort of a cheat of my argument. All right, the clocks on the GPS satellite run slower up there in a weaker part of the Earth's gravitational field than those down here on the ground do. So again, you have that backwards. Ours are the more dilated clocks. The ones in space are moving faster. So you don't even have that correct. If that is not factored in, then GPS would have you driving over a field and going nearby. So again, the fact that they knew about this, even without Einstein telling them why this happens, they would have figured out that it happens. So it's not some huge mystery. And they don't even need Einstein's formula to figure out how to correct for it because they can see how far off it is. So even without Einstein, they would be able to figure out that it works better if they adjust the clock. They would find out that, oh yeah, it's much more precise. So again, they don't have to use a formula. to figure out the effect. Doesn't prove Einstein right about anything. All right. Over Field and Glenn, thereby proving Einstein was right yet again. So again, he wasn't right originally when you idiots said it, with his stupid Eddington experiment, which was rubbish. And the fact is, he's not right. Okay, the fact that there's a relationship between clocks breaking and velocity has nothing to do with whether or not there's anything called relativity. You don't need relativity to understand that correlation. And clearly, people understood the correlation long before Einstein. The novel, The Time Machine, was written before Einstein. People had already speculated about what the consequences of the speed of light were and how that would implicate time if you could go faster than light. And so this wasn't something people had no idea. Again, just more rubbish, more propaganda. And then what about LIGO, proving Einstein was right about gravitational waves? So again, it doesn't prove it because Einstein said you wouldn't be able to detect them because Einstein didn't believe you could convert mass into bent space. And the only way they could make these waves hearable was to convert mass into bent space. So again, this is an insult to the truth. Again, you're just deplorable liars. Einstein never speculated in any positive way about detecting anything called a gravity wave. And he clearly never speculated about any function where you could turn matter into bent space. Not matter into energy. He certainly thought you could do that. He certainly thought you could turn matter into photons, but you can't turn into bent space. He had no theory for that, asshole. So quit lying about dead people, you cunt. Okay, and then he says, very cool, all this evidence. Your evidence sucks. You're just lying propagandists. I mean, the evidence is insanely weak for all of this theory. It's nothing like evolution, not even close to anything like evolution. It's like you showing up and saying evolution is a fact, and all you have is a red chicken and a white chicken. You have like almost nothing. No geological evidence, no DNA, no geology, no fossil record, no strata. You have nothing, and you just assert it. So fuck you. Way short of evidence. All right, I think Ken's hen is full of brown, stinky jello. Well, it's not very useful, but it's full of shit, that's for sure. Hello, Gary. I'm world-renowned Spanish bullfighter. Okay, so that guy's whole again. I'll block him again just for the fun of it. All right, now this idiot. Let's see what. Oops. Oh, look at all this shit. I don't think I want to read all that. No, I don't think so. Well, there's some of it. A little politeness. Let's see if there's any new commenters might be more interesting than this novel this guy wrote. How to harness and convert the most abundant natural resource on Earth's gravity. So again, we've already have a bunch of ways to do that. Hydroelectric, the most obvious one, windmills, tides. There's all kinds of ways to harness part of the cycle gravity can create. Gravity can create cycles, because of the Earth's heat. The moisture is lifted into the atmosphere, and we can collect the rain in a bucket, and the bucket will have mass, and we can, but obviously we can do it on streams and all kinds of ways we can capture the consequences of gravity. But you're not there's no whatever you're looking for, there isn't anymore. There's just those mechanisms, and you can capitalize on them, but they're kind of expensive, some of them. I mean, the search for free energy is just so silly. Damn, I mean, you want it dirt cheap, and dirt cheap is messy. That's how you pollute the planet, is the dirt cheap solution. Damn a fulcrum. We should be able to make something. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you can barely type English, and you're trying to do magical fulcrums. Okay, whatever. I don't know, whatever. I just the agenda is to understand the truth. Not to force the truth to be what you want it to be, just to get the right answers. I'm arguing that physics has a bunch of wrong answers because it's jumped way too quick. It's jumped the evidence. It doesn't have enough evidence for the conclusions it's drawn. It should wait until it has enough evidence before it draws conclusions. All right, it would be easier to make simple and less words understand that video. Oh, that's a great sentence. So he wrote all this crap, and it's all going to be written as badly as this sentence. It would be easier to make simple and less words understand that video. But a lot of words and stuff. Gee, what a crime. Too many words. But what I understand, I'm afraid to even consider that, is red and blue is a force. Yes. So it is two forces. No, I said it over and over again. They're exactly alike, except one's red and one's blue. They don't have to be exactly alike, but the point is no, yeah, I've already explained this, but yeah. They have a simple difference, and the simple difference can be detected by an electron and a proton. There's a left hand and a right hand. There's a blue key and a red key. The red key works on electrons, the blue key works on protons, that kind of thing. It's just not that complicated. All right, so it is two forces. It's two force. So two forces that meets to cancel out. No, there's no meeting and canceling out. Never said anything like that. So it becomes a current. No current talk. Like you say, magnet need magnet. I don't know where I said that, but whatever. Magnets react to magnetism. That's how you know you have a magnet, is you have to put it in the presence of magnetism. The compass needle is nothing if there's no magnets around. Then a compass needle is just a piece of metal. Nothing special at all. The magnet has to have magnetism to be doing anything important. It can only filter in an environment that's creating something. It can only be known to be a filter if there's something in the environment that can detect filters. Yeah, it's the way it works. So it's okay, cancel now. Now that happens. Red and blue is two magnetic field the meets or repels. So red and blue is two magnet field that meets or repels. Can't do anything with that. So you say at center there is no magnet. I didn't say any such thing. I said the magnet's made of a bunch of little magnets. The atoms are the little magnets. Little magnets end up making big magnet. So it is the same at the edge there is magnet. So it is breaking or still the mass. You say monopole and dipole. I said the electron and the proton are the individual monopoles that create the dipole that is a magnet. Yes. And monopole is at center. Never said anything like that. So I don't know. I just don't know how people listen so badly. Dipole is at edge. I never said that. So dipole is magnet which create current. Wrong, never said that. That two magnet field to slow it down. no slowing anything down. Monopole is one magnet field, so it has no slow or speed it either way. Speed has nothing to do with any of this. It is like you are supporting Ken Wheeler because no negative response. And I assume you want to debunk because you are particle guy. Yeah, so I don't know where you can't figure out how my argument's completely different than Ken Wheeler's argument. And my argument's actually a rational description of mechanical function, not a fairy tale notion about a hyperboloid, and somehow hyperboloid means attraction and toroid means repulsion by some magical mechanism that he can't describe how it actually physically happens. I mean, this is, I'll quit reading soon because this is just rubbish. I don't know what you're trying to do. So it like you are adding info to Ken Wheeler by explaining more about dipole and monopole center and edge. Well, what you believe magnet is, dipole or monopole, or both. It's just so retarded. So you've heard me talk about the two kinds of force. So you've clearly understood I'm talking about electron force and proton force, and clearly stating that the electron and the proton are polar opposite particles. And when in association with each other in a particular way, they create something called a magnet. All right. So the explanation from that above video with monopole and dipole. So dipole is cancel out. Oh, fuck this. Sorry, too inarticulate. Okay. No, just a waste of time. Clearly, it's a waste of time. All right. All right, so another fake person. My name is Pablo Dango Jose Franco de Paula, whatever. Yes, hilarious. Oh, you're so funny. God. Ugh. I mean, how much herpes was on your mother's cunt when you came out of her, skanky hole? I mean, geez, you must be a herpes baby. I think Trump is Jesus. Well, that's really insanely unclever of you. I mean, really. I mean, unless you think Jesus was a horrible liar, which most people don't think he was a horrible liar. They think he was sort of a misguided do-gooder. You think Trump is a misguided do-gooder, or do you think it's exactly the opposite? Okay, a sinisterly guided bad doer. Ugh, idiots. All right, any idea what makes the force bounce between electrons with angles that make it able to trap it and not with other angles that would free it? Well, I mean, obviously that could be done by shape. Um, but what the specific rules are, um, there's only so much detail you're ever going to be able to glean from the environment. I don't think you're ever going to see any of this stuff. So, I can only attempt to provide some argumentation, but this is sort of a good subject. So the idea is that what we understand about what I understand, okay, this is another part of physics that's left pretty strange. So you have this idea of the electrons, and maybe I'll draw a proton just for the hell of it, just so you get the idea that there's more we're talking about. Whoa, Jesus Christ, I don't know why that goes so badly. How come this brush thing, there's usually a bigger tool than this, actually. Smart brush, I don't know if I want a smart one. I think I'd rather have a dumb brush. All right, but whatever. Just a plain old brush. Plain old phone. I don't want my phone being too smart. All right, anyway. That is an ugly red. I like it at all. Anyway, all right. So let's draw another electron. So just so we can play along. I would argue that you could do this with, you have to recognize that the nucleus has these neutrons in it. Neutrons are the things that probably carry an extra electron. So all of this stuff happens in other ways. But the idea is that this black force, the little black bits, are bouncing back and forth between the electrons. And that other forces, okay, would do the same. So there'd be red force between protons that could reflect. And that if the contrary force goes in, it comes out perpendicularly, and all these other kind of arguments, okay? And what we're really talking about is momentum. So like when they say an electron moves, they might just be measuring the fact that it moves this way. It gets pushed by a force, goes a little bit this way. That creates extra pressure over here, which means the electron moves back this way. All right, so in a sense, it's like the AC current argument. It's not really, the electron isn't really going somewhere. It's just vibrating back and forth. And in vibrating back and forth, it means it gains velocity in one direction, which means that it has to excrete force in some direction. So it excretes force, say, out perpendicularly. So it's, in a sense, it's my mass momentum argument. As you increase something's momentum in a direction, you decrease its mass in the other dimensions. So as it gets heavier, the way you're pushing it, it gets lighter in these other directions, theoretically. And that's sort of what these electrons are doing. So as you're accelerating it one way, it gives up mass in one direction, so it can take mass in this new direction. And then when it's pushed back the other way, it does the same thing. It gives up mass this way to take mass in this new direction. So it's just consuming energy in these directions. So by going like this, it has to release force this way to keep moving in some other direction. All right, and so the question is that when photons, regular physics doesn't really give an explanation for where photons come from. They just sort of have this idea that two electrons are in some kind of relationship to each other, and one's the anti-electron, let's say, and somehow they collide into each other, bang into each other, and somehow photon comes out, and the two electrons are annihilated or some bullshit. They just give you these weird explanations for where photons come from, as if they're inside of the electron, when all the electron's doing is moving based on what the force is doing. So these arrows are the thing that's going to decide where the electron moves. The electron doesn't do anything unless it's forced to do it. Okay, so it's moving based on what forces are pulling on it, not based on what it wants to do, because it doesn't have any self-motivation. It doesn't have any built-in motivation. It just is completely a victim to the forces around it. And the forces around it are these photons. So the idea is, when you perturb an atom, when you do something to fuck with it in certain ways, you can cause one of these photons. And again, they're not one. I mean, to to be able to receive it, we have to have a frequency, which means there has to be more than one of them. Because again, these are little bits. They're not, there's no photon as some long arrow here. There's just a distance between little bits. And so the idea would be is that something changes where all of a sudden now there's an angle that these things can come out at, where this force, the force that was trapped between two electrons going back and forth, all of a sudden stops going back and forth and escapes into the environment. So you can sort of understand that there's this particular alignment issue, that once something gets in, it tends to stay in, and once it's out, it's out. So you could argue that that could be accomplished by shape. That is, if I make the electron shaped, like some sort of inverted star thing. So it's like bowls. You could sort of understand that anything that came in would reflect, its angle of reflection would tend to straighten it, like a trampoline, and it would keep bouncing towards the center. So the electron could just be shaped in the way where it catches, like a parabola. So a parabola will, a bowl shape, will tend to catch things from different angles and force them all to a focus. But it's a focus, it's a one point is where they'll all converge. And that might be true for electrons, that at a certain distance they converge, and when they get a certain amount of separation, that focus gets wider. So so you can get the idea that they come into the bowl and they reflect towards a focus. And if they go past the focus, then they can reflect off the other bowl and have another focus down here and go a little bit past and still get away with it. But if they start to separate too far, then the focus gets past and the two things end up too far away from each other, and you lose that piece of energy. You lose that bit of pressure. So I think that's what the question is related to, is just basically how do you collect this energy from the external world to pressurize these electrons, and then how do you eventually release that pressure? So what's basically happening inside of atoms is photons go in, sometimes they're trapped. And so when they're trapped, I've explained before, it's essentially just capturing their momentum. So the photon has a momentum in a direction, like a little matchbox car. Okay, so you just think of it as a little car, all right? Little car, it's a bad drawing of a car, I think. Okay. All right, well, it's not that bad considering its size. Wait, a little car. A little car goes into a U, a loop-to-loop. And it never gets out. So it goes in and it just stays in there. So ignore this little out part because it can't get out yet. So it goes into the matter bit, the atom, from a direction, and essentially gets caught in a loop forever, or theoretically for a while. For as long as the atom is stable, it's trapped in there. And then for the energy of that particular car to be released, you can't just let a car go this way, because that only has a component of energy in this direction. So that's only half the energy in that direction. So it still has half the energy in this direction, and what you've given away is half of energy in this downward direction. So you eventually the angular momentum is all conserved, is the point. Whatever way the force went in, the circle knows, okay, which way the energy came in. The mechanism knows. The atom has that information stored in its motion. And there won't be an undoing of that momentum until you actually give away all the elements in the direction that you first absorbed it in. That's what I'm trying to say. All right, I think that covers it. Thank you. Reasonable question. Yeah, so like details, I'm certainly not going to be able to, I can't give you the exact shape and configuration of electrons. I can only give you the principle that makes a lot more sense than their non-answer. So they won't give you an answer for where the photons come from. At least I'm giving you an answer for where they come from. and that they're not physically part of the electron. The photons are what's trapped between the electrons. They're the thing creating the repulsive pressure between the electrons. Oh yeah, I have to go back this way. No, I don't. I have to just do this. There we go. All right, okay, so that's good, did that. You can't use gravity to its fullest if you don't fully understand gravity. Again, I don't know what your argument is. I've given you an explanation for what gravity is. You aren't countering anything. I mean, if this is all you're going to do is say some stupid trideism, what the fuck value does this have? I mean, oh, duh. So your theory is that we don't understand gravity, therefore we don't know how to get magic energy out of it. Well, what's your understanding of gravity? What do you think gravity is? I mean, right now they have a special magic force that creates gravity. All right. Now, obviously, it's really hard for us to figure out how to make a bent space. Or let's make some bent space. That's a little tricky, right? I mean, let's make a magic wand. Let's make a fairy godmother. I mean, you understand how, yeah, that's not going to work. But what's your fucking theory? Magic ether? Well, why don't you explain to me how you make magic ether? How do I make a bucket of magic ether? Spinning ether, swirling ether, a bucket full of swirling ether. To me, that's just as silly, okay, as making a talking bear. So I don't know what the fuck use a statement like this is. I don't think you really have to understand something fully to exploit it. Like the round wheel. You don't have to understand everything about a round wheel to exploit the fuck out of its utility. So even your cliche isn't really true. All right. Apart from spheres, though, all other shapes made of actual stuff seem to only be an arrangement of other spheres. I would say exactly the opposite, that spheres are not what the fundamental physics is made out of. I say it's probably made out of squares. Okay, it's probably square geometry, that atoms really do have a hexagonal shapes and that kind of stuff. They got square edges. Nothing's running curved lines. There's no curved lines in the micro universe. It's straight lines. It's Elising. You see the Elise lines, just like if I draw a circle, depending on what my pixel depth is, you'll be able to see the straight lines in the circle. It's a bunch of little straight lines. So there are no circles in the tiny universe. All right. Never mind. That's what you meant by shape. I don't know what that means. Is this vibration back and forth the reason why an electron position isn't easily predictable? An electron's position isn't predictable because we can't know where it was anyway. We can't know its position technically without imposing a force on it. So there's no way you have to fuck with it to see it. So the only way you can know its position is by forcing it into a position. I mean, you can't see an electron just, oh yeah, let's look at it. No, you have to put charge over here and charge over here and charge up here and charge. You have to put it in an environment that forces it to be where you say it is. So there is no predicting anything, first off, because you can never test your prediction with an actual, oh yeah, we know where it was. No, there is no such thing as we knew where it was or we found out where it was. They never do that. So there's no prediction because there's no result to the test. There's no testing the prediction. So it's just nonsense anyway. But yes, clearly they make arguments about how fast electrons are moving in conductors, for example. And that motion may just be this. They're just counting this. And because this one did it, and the next one does it, and the next one does it, they think that's an electron moving. When no, those are just electrons doing this. You know, they're not really moving. All right. It would be weird to imagine a particle in a non-spherical shape. Well, I don't know. I mean, lots of things are weird, okay? You can imagine lots of weird things, you know. Some kind of bizarre threesome or something. I mean, there's lots of things that you might say, oh, yeah, I'm not really into that. That's kind of kinky and weird. But I frankly find the idea of geometric atoms, I think that makes a hell of a lot of sense, actually. Legos make a lot more sense. If we made Legos round, you wouldn't think that makes too much sense. All right, some electrons around some atoms can only be knocked out when you send in a precise amount of energy. It's not about the amount of energy, but whatever. Any explanation for that? I mean, I've been over that one so many times. It just amazes me that I have to redo it again. You know, but I'll do it. This is just the trampoline argument. I mean, this one's just so simple, but but it's huge because this is the whole de Broglie lie. I mean, the whole bullshit that we're going to turn two different words, two different concepts into the same thing. So we're going to turn the word frequency into the word intensity, and they're not the same, or momentum, and they're not the same thing. Momentum and frequency are not the same thing. So the simple argument is you have an electron, and it is held in a position by tension, forces, okay? That means it's attracted, but it's repelled, and so you can sort of understand it's in a tension. So it's like there's a magnet pulling it down, and then there's two other magnets pushing it away. So it's caught in tension. But you can sort of understand that tension as just being like a trampoline, okay? And so you could just think of the electron as sitting on a trampoline. And the point is you're going to hit it with stuff and try to make it bounce free of the trampoline. So just think of the electron as sitting on this trampoline, but it's glued on with some double stick tape. So you know that the tape is strong, but it's not super strong. So a certain amount of force and the tape is going to give way and the electron's going to be free. But not enough force and the tape will hold. So here I am hitting it with these little beads, okay? I'm going to throw little rocks at it, all right? And when I throw these rocks down at it, we'll do it straight down just to make it more easy to see. So I'm going to throw these rocks down on this electron, and it's going to knock it down into the trampoline, right? And then it's going to bounce back up. Now, if I throw the rocks with like a long period of time between the rocks I throw, you can understand that, well, I throw a rock, the electron goes down, electron goes back up, you know, and then it just normalizes back to where it was. So if I throw them slowly, nothing really happens. It just goes down a little bit. The electron moves up a little bit, but it's not nearly enough force to break the tape. So the tape holds and the electron just stays where it is. But you can understand now if I do these things quickly, that is, I throw rocks much faster rate, then when the one rock hits, it's going to knock it down to here. And then when the second rock hits, it's going to knock it down even further. So now it's a lot further down. So there's a lot more tension now. And so when it shoots back up, it's going to shoot up at a faster total velocity. So it's going to shoot up this far. And that far means it has a higher velocity. And that higher velocity means it has more momentum, and it's going to break the tape, and the electron will be free, and it'll fly in the air. So that's so you can understand that the intensity of the rocks didn't have anything to do with it. It was the frequency of the rocks. That is, you hit the electron before it could rebound. So you got to it before it could relax. And that's the only reason why the high frequency rocks worked and the low frequency rocks didn't. It had nothing to do with any intensity argument. It didn't have anything to do with how big the rocks were or how hard I threw the rocks, because I threw all the rocks the same amount of hardness. It just had to do with, if you throw them faster, it takes advantage of the tension and allows for this phenomenon. So, but this has nothing to do with more intensity. You don't call, because I shoot a gun every half second, or I shoot the gun every second, you don't say the bullets had more intensity. You don't think that the bullets are moving faster or the bullets are heavier. You just understand it's more bullets in a period of time, and more bullets in a specific amount of time can do more damage. But it has nothing to do with momentum per se. It has to do with timing and things having a tipping point. So that's why you could throw the widely spaced rocks all day long and not a single electron gets free. And you just shoot fast ones for 1 second and you shoot electron free. It's just taking advantage of the weakness of the electron, its circumstantial position. So again, it's just an example of physics ignoring the material circumstance and just pretending the electron is some free agent and there's no circumstance that you're manipulating. So again, it's just ignore the material explanation and pretend that the photons have all the magic powers. When the photon has no magic power here, the electron has a circumstantial position. I mean, damn. It's depressing that people can't get this. Let's see. Oh, do I believe in God? God, why'd you go fuck yourself till dead? All right. Never mind. That's what you meant. Okay. This is it would be weird to make an article. All right. That's my explanation. Okay. So you deleted your other stuff. Well, anyway, do you believe in God? Fuck you. Are you an atheist? Fuck you. Just retarded crap. I'll remove it, but I'm with that. I'm going to block you any second. Just idiotic. Do metals really have free electrons in them? Well, free is a silly word. Obviously they're not free or they wouldn't be there. I guess you could argue, right? There's no bunch of, like, if I go into space, we're not going to find a bunch of free electrons, right? Because there's always gravitational biases. So the electrons are certainly going to be gravitationally biased in some direction and they're going to be heading somewhere else. So, free, no, they're not highly bound, but they're not free. So that's the trick word here. They're attracted to the protons and repelled by the electrons. So they like to be a certain place away from the atom, but they're not really part of the atom. I think that would be a rational way of understanding them. But anyway, we'll see. He believes in a God frame, an absolute frame of reference. It's not a God frame, so fuck you. Yeah, I think there's such a thing as the absolute speed, and the absolute speed means something. If you don't think it means something, if you think you can just make a frame where something's moving half the speed of light, I can put that in another frame and make it go half the speed of light, and then I can put another frame, make it go half the speed of light, and that those three halves don't equal more than one whole, then you're a fucking retard. So yes, things can go very slow and things can go very fast. And if you don't understand that, you're really fucking stupid. Let's see. He also uses logic of whatever this is, theologians of the Middle Ages, where I've never mentioned anyone from the Middle Ages. I've never done any of that. So just lie some more. I actually deal with evidence, douchebag, where you don't have any, douchebag, as you're demonstrating, douchebag. You have to lie about what I'm saying, and pretend I haven't just directly made arguments pointing out how you're the one with no explanation for where the energy came from, jackass. You're the one depending on magic wands and fairies, angels for your explanation, invisible, non-existent, virtual photons, fuckface. You're the one with magic all over the place, you weak little shit. All right. Do you believe truth exists? Okay, I just delete you. Yeah, duh, asshole. Yeah, there's one reality. You can either accurately describe it or inaccurately describe it. The accurate description of you is you're a fucking douche. Jesus. Fucking cunt. Who would think a channel called Draft Science is a religious channel? I mean, why would you even bother doing that? I mean, and again, it's just a sole argument. There's only 1,000 videos on the channel. If you had any interest, you could just watch one of them and you'll find out what I am. This will be no indication whatsoever that I believe in a creator. Oh, these people are just such scum. Scummy, ignorant trolls. Kill all the mothers. They're all fucking criminals. Mama, don't let your baby grow up to be a dumb fucking troll. It doesn't matter what he was doing. Why would I want somebody to feed a troll here? Who was he talking to? Did he put their name in the subjects at all? No. Just wasting people's time. What kind of math do you know? Well, I know rational number math. Yeah. What kind of math do you know? Frankly, what kind of math do you have to know to simply answer the question I've asked? Where's the energy come from to move the Earth into the sun? Where does the energy come from to move one magnet into another magnet? Where does the energy come from? What's that cool thing in the background? It's irrelevant. That's what it is. It's the irrelevancy machine. The irrelevancy machine. You can't do physics without math. So I can't make a round wheel without doing math. I can't make a square wheel without doing math. Yes, I can. All right, now if you know all that stuff, why can't you answer my simple questions? So there's videos on my channel on the homepage. They're called question videos. Why don't you answer some of those questions with your math? Why don't you answer the questions I've asked right here? Where does the energy come from to move the Earth into the sun, to accelerate it towards the sun? If I want to move this pen sideways, I have to provide energy. Where does this come from? Explanation? Where are the calories being burned? Is the pen burning them? Is the Earth burning them? Who's burning the calories to make the pen move? Well, it's saying it comes from mass. Well, how? How does it do that? A perpetual vacuum cleaner. Is that your theory? The perpetual vacuum cleaner? It sucks empty space, and somehow this pen knows there's a bunch of missing empty space here. A bunch of empty space is missing. you know, so it has to move into the double vacuum. No, it's fine. If this guy knows calculus and he knows differential equations and he knows how to do these linear algorithms and all this stuff, then great. Let him demonstrate that he can understand some of these simple arguments. If you're going to say that F equals M1 M2 G over R squared, that's the inverse square law. Okay, we know that G is an irrelevant constant, so we don't even need that in the equation. So what have you demonstrated? You've demonstrated nothing. You've explained nothing about where the energy came from. If this has to move sideways, I either have to put a flame over here, I have to do something, I have to burn energy. Somewhere I have to change one form of atomic structure into another form to have energy to move something. What gets lighter when the sun pulls the earth? So again, that's the force of gravity, he calls it, when quite obviously the two masses, all right, the gravity exists without the masses. So do you think the sun's gravity doesn't exist when the earth doesn't exist? Gravitational potential energy. Well, here we go. Gravitational potential energy. So now we've defined it as potential energy. Okay, gets converted kinetic energy. So that's not even a rational sentence, is it? I mean, gravitational potential energy gets converted kinetic energy. That doesn't even make sense as a sentence. It's all about conversion of energy. Conversion of what energy? You're saying that the pressure inside the earth or the pressure inside the sun is creating the gravity, when the fact is the gravity created the pressure. Okay, so you can't use the very pressure your thing causes to explain the cause. That's like using your little bent fabric bullshit and saying, look, the bent fabric, see, I dropped the ball and it falls into the well. You're using this falling into a well analogy when, no, there is no falling into the well. I should be able to turn your model upside down and it's supposed to still work. Your model doesn't work when it's upside down because it's a shitty model. It's all about conversion of energy. Again, converted from where? Where does the energy come from? Again, we know that those big giant tanks on the space shuttle hold a whole bunch of fuel. And that's why the space shuttle moves, is because it's converting stuff in those tanks. Where's the empty tanks for the Earth and the sun? For the Earth and the moon? Where are the empty fucking tanks? That's the whole idea of somehow particles knowing about some void never made sense to me. Exactly. I mean, well, I'm just saying that it doesn't make any sense, even if you accept their theory that there's a perpetual vacuum cleaner. What the fuck is the perpetual vacuum cleaner vacuuming? All right, they're not calling it an ether, so it can't have tension. So how can I pull on it? How can it be like water where I can pull on it, suck it up, and the water molecules stick to each other so they keep coming? Well, that is a shitty analogy, isn't it? So you're saying your ether, the substance I'm pulling is a something, not a nothing. So space isn't space. Space is what? Water? Really tiny water? What's your explanation? And again, if you're pulling on something that's a real fabric, to pull on a real fabric, I need real energy. I can't just magically pull on something. The sun's gravity is always there as long as there is mass. So you just keep saying nothing. Mass alone won't do it. I mean, it really won't, as I've sort of explained, but you have to account for the acceleration. You have to account for how the sun's pressure is created. The pressure inside the sun is a consequence of gravity. Gravity's moving the atoms all the time towards the center of the sun. Now, they're not really moving towards the center. They're moving towards the other side of the sun, but it doesn't really matter. They end up in the center. And there's a ton of pressure there created by gravity. Now, the sun hasn't lose any mass. So how does it move all of those particles without losing any mass? I don't understand the context about the title. I'm saying there's no starter. You don't have a start as a theory of physics if you create something that doesn't explain where the energy comes from. That's a magic wand. That's not physics. That's a God theory. That's an invisible man theory. That's a three bears story. That's like somebody saying, my dog ate my homework. I mean, it's too empty to be the start for your theory. So if you can't explain where the energy for your event came from, you've destroyed physics. You're done doing physics. You're doing metaphysics. Okay? If you don't have energy, you're doing metaphysics. You're not doing physics. Well, obviously, energy is either in potential or kinetic in the sense of it's realized as motion. I'm arguing that energy is in the photons. The photons are the energy of the universe. And they're in the form of gravitons when they're gravity and magnetons when they're magnetism. It's all one force moving one speed. And all the energy, cosmic background radiation style energy, okay, it's just magnets just filter it, okay? Photons, the electromagnetic spectrum is just the force at a frequency, but it's just little bits moving the speed of light. They're the energy. And so they're the only thing that can make something material move. Without them, the material thing doesn't move. So you have to explain where they're causing the motion. I'm just saying you don't have any explanation for motion, and except that you require everything else to explain it. Like I said, if I say this pen just magically went sideways, you'd say it can't do that. It can't just magically go sideways. You'd force me to explain what energy caused it to move. You'd force the Newton requirement to do your F equals ma bullshit. Where did the acceleration come from? What force did it? All right, let's see. Let's see, you're too stupid to understand it without math. And so are you. That's not terribly useful. All right, we did that already. The sun's gravity is always there. Okay, I already did that. Already did that. I didn't think anyone here doubts this practical concept of potential kinetic energy. If you move a car up a hill, you can surely make it get inertia as it goes down. Well, obviously there's no what goes up must come down rules in absolute space in a sense, but yes, clearly, if you want something to go this way, you have to make something go that way. That part we all should be able to agree on. Force of gravity is not pressure. Then what is it? All right, force of gravity is not pressure. So you don't have to make something go this way to make something go this way. So you don't have to obey conservation laws. You don't have to release something this way, like in that stupid interstellar rule. Well, you have to leave something behind to goes someplace, or whatever they said. I mean, clearly this is true. In every other circumstance, we understand that if I want this to go that way, I have to give the universe this way. And that's what the space shuttle is doing. To make the little astronauts in the shuttle go this way, it has to give a whole bunch of crap going that way. Where's your conservation in your virtual magnetic photon, your non-existent photon? Where does it come from, that non-existent photon? All right, force of gravity is not pressure. Yes, it is. I don't even know why log num brings it up. I don't know what that means, but whatever. Pressure and force is not the same thing. We'll explain how they're different. Let's see, that's right, loganum. Pressure is defined as F divided by A equals P momentum. So force divided by acceleration is momentum. How does that define pressure? Oh, you're saying P is for pressure now. Yeah, they're always using these letters different ways. So you're saying pressure is force divided by acceleration? You don't even have any of those in this equation, so I don't even understand how you can possibly talk about, you think you know what pressure is? The pressure is the application of a force. Force causes pressure. Do you understand that much? You can't apply a force without applying a pressure? You don't understand that? It can become anything. That doesn't mean anything, of course. Let's rename the current model the perpetual ether vacuum cleaner theory. Yes, exactly. I mean, there's no other way. I mean, Susskind, one of the most respected quantum bullshitters, he actually explains it as, a perpetual waterfall and a perpetual drain. You just drain the water and it keeps coming in from over here, and you just drain it over here. La, 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 la. No, we don't have to get the energy from somewhere. We guess it just comes out of the multiverse. It comes out of the universal waterfall provides the energy. Let's see. Have you heard of Einstein's theory of relativity? I mean, really, just watch. Again, I can't tell you what to do, all right? You want to sit there in a live room and talk like you've paid any attention to my theory whatsoever when you haven't. But I'm not going to tutor you personally, retard. It's just idiotic for you to say Einstein's theory of relativity describes what gravity actually is. There's absolutely no description in his fucking theory. There's descriptions of a consequence. There's no description of a cause, you retard. Everybody can describe the results. He describes nothing as a function, as a cause for the effect. Describing effects is easy. Let's see. All right, so you're now really dumb. Actually, the sun does lose mass from creating photons, idiot. Photons. That's the real component. It loses mass because it's losing photons, which are actually bits of energy. So, duh, idiot, of course. But it doesn't lose mass commensurate with the amount of acceleration it causes in the Earth. Nowhere near that amount of, how many photons it would take to push the Earth into the sun every second, to be pushing the Earth towards the sun every second to create the circular orbit. You want to give me, you'd say math? Why don't you give me the daily calculation for how much energy I would have to burn in space shuttle hydrogen? How many cubic tons of hydrogen would I have to burn to have, if I put engines on the Earth, to keep it in orbit for one day? Why don't you give me that calculation? And then I'll demonstrate how the sun doesn't lose that much mass in 10 years. Idiot. Let's see. Where was I? Let's see. I've heard. Okay, yeah, we did that. All right. So anyway, amazingly dumb statement from you there. Actually, the sun does lose mass, not from moving the Earth. Okay. Wrong answer. Just fucking ask what. Just fucking ask what your question is. You're just denying what is explained. So again, my questions are obvious. Where's the energy come from? The Earth is moved. To move the Earth requires, it's a huge mass, heavy, takes a lot of energy to move it somewhere. Where does the energy come from to move the Earth? The only way you can have a magnetic field is if a change moves, a charge moves. All right, so more nonsense. In a big picture sense. So inside of a magnet, you're saying a charge is moving, right? That's your story. That inside of the magnet, there's some sort of bunch of stuff moving that's creating some kind of energy field around the magnet. It's radiating a field, and you're saying the field is created by charges moving. Well, what's moving the charges? Where do they get their momentum from? And what's holding them into place? That is, what's pushing them to stay inside the atom? Where's the energy for that? I mean, it's just such horse shit. Let's see. Just fucking ask a question. Yeah, we did that. All right. The only way you can have a magnetic field is if a charge moves. Again, so it's just nonsense. No. See, you're just not. If you were smart, you'd understand that both gravity and magnetism have unexplained energy. So you could just logically say to yourself, well, what if I said the energy comes from the outside? Then you can make it make sense. So then you can use Mach gravity to explain gravity, because it works really well, particle gravity. And then if you think about the magnet as a filter for that gravity, that is, it's filtering a electron force and a proton force, well, then you can explain magnetism and explain why magnets behave the way they do, why they can repel when they're have consistent poles, and when you reverse the poles, they attract. All of that can be explained. But you're not clever enough to do that. You're just a little putz who shows up and talks shit without paying any attention. Again, you haven't watched any of my videos, obviously. You have no understanding of my theory, and yet you're talking as if you got proof of something, or that you have evidence of something. And it's fine if you want to defend their physics. I'm just saying, how do you defend a virtual photon? How do you defend that as anything close to a complete enough answer? Like, that's good enough. We'll just use this magical thing. A magical photon creates magnetism. The sun is said to lose mass because of nuclear fusion. Yes, that's creating the photons, the heat. The heat, idiot, of the sun. It's radiating a bunch of radiation. Have you heard of radiation? Yes, the sun is radiating little bits, little atomic bits at momentum. It took force to do that, and that's what's left over from converting heavy molecule into small molecule, or from, obviously, the sun is taking two little molecules, making one big molecule, and then has a bunch of little bits left over, and the little bits are the heat. So again, what does that have to do with gravity? Oh, that's right, nothing. The amount of mass the sun is losing is the mass of the energy in photons the sun is radiating. That is not what's called gravity. Oh, that's you're saying that. Okay. You're making my point for me. Oh. Just make the chat full screen. Oh my God. No, I'm not doing that. Fuck you. Entropy, question mark. What does that have to do with this? You're not letting anyone say anything when you can't see that chat. What are you talking about, retard? I'm reading the chat, asshole. I should read it in something other than the order it's typed, you fucking retard. I mean, you're wasting space with oh my good. Yeah, you're really smart. Let's see. The force of gravity is just a curvature of space time. Again, it's just a magic wand. You might as well just say it's just a magic wand. It's a magical duty da 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 da. It's blah 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 blah. These are just little play words. A curvature of space time. What's a space time? What the fuck is that? Is it a nothing or a something? I mean, how is it different from just saying angels done it? How is saying it's a curvature of space time? How is that different from saying lovey, lovey angel, angel did it? How is it any more of a bullshit answer? I know, it's just funny. I don't know what that means. Yeah, he's just defying whatever that means. P is pressure. You really did that. A is area. Who cares? Again, the argument is simple, okay? Force causes pressure. You say force doesn't cause pressure, you're an idiot. This is the reason why you can't do physics without math. You didn't show any reason at all. Physics is a description of reality. You can describe something without mathematics. I don't need any math at all to describe why a cup keeps fluid in it. Don't have to do math. Idiot. Anyway, just same old bullshit. Retard. Let's see. He doesn't know smoking is bad. Again, so you're wasting my time. I really, yeah, I'm addicted to nicotine, idiot. I really couldn't give a shit. I don't need your advice, weasel, small dick. So take that crap someplace else. Oh, fuck off. All right, P is pressure. A is area. We did that. This is 3 now. We already did that. Every high school kid knows that A is area. Oh, well, I'm not going to argue this nonsense. I mean, I can show you formulas where A equals the width of a slit. I can show you another formula where A equals something completely different. So fuck you in the ass until so fucking dead. Again, what does it have to do with the point being made? It doesn't have anything to do with it. I'm asking you to point out where the force came from. You're saying it's a magic force from this special dimension. And then you're saying that's not just like saying the angels did it. All right, no description because you're too stupid to understand the math. So again, it's just no description of what? Where did I not provide a description? You're the one with no description. All right. It's the theory of geometry, nothing more. Is that an answer? It's the theory of geometry, nothing more. What does that even mean? So I can make a square and then I can make the square bounce and I have to explain why the square is bouncing. I can just say it does. Isn't that good enough? LOL. I don't know what that means, but this is pure comedy. No more wasted time. Yep, the electrons are spinning. More wasted time. See Lesage gravity. It's an interesting theory, I'll admit. Well, again, you don't have to see Lesage because I've already pointed out how I can make magnetism out of it, so I can do a lot better. But see Mach gravity. Okay, that's the scientific version, the more scientific version. But clearly it works for gravity. It has one glaring issue of drag that has to be explained, but outside of that, it does gravity really well. Anyway, I'm subscribing to you. Well, I'm not really interested to you because you're so stupid. It's comedy. Well, do whatever you want. I'm just saying you haven't provided a single answer to any of my questions. All right. So if you want to really do any of your math, you want to prove to me that you have an argument you can make, then why don't you prove it? but you're not proving to me anyway. Okay, I'm the one demonstrating how your silly formula for gravity is a silly formula, because we already know that the gravity exists without the second body being in the formula. We already know there's a force of gravity, so I don't need the M2, do I? I should be able to do the formula with just the M, right? What do I need the M2 for? University brainwashed. All hail the math. Math is just a tool. Look, it's just a way of formalizing, right? So that's what a formula is, right? It's formalizing. That is, it's taking something that's got a bunch of stuff to it, and it's taking it and finding the clinical important parts and emphasizing their relationship. A perfectly valid thing to do. I have no opposition to mathematics. There's very few formulas I'm disagreeing with. I'm sitting here defending E equals mc squared, defending, yes, F equals ma even. Most of this stuff I'll be defending. So I'm not opposed to mathematics. I'm just saying that math is not a description of reality. You still have to explain where something comes from. You can't just say virtual photon and throw it in a mathematical formula and say, there, I've done my job. That's not a description. No one is disagreeing. Math is just a tool to describe. Describe effects. It's not describing causes. So again, it's more just bullshit. Math doesn't describe causes. Isn't physics supposed to do causes? Aren't the effects obvious? Do I need a physicist to tell me what the effects are? No. I need the physicist to tell me what the fucking causes are. And all of their causes are silly. Dark matter, dark energy, expanding space, bent geometry, virtual photons. They don't have a rational answer to a single cause statement. All right. The mechanism described here are already based on evidence. I don't know what that means, but okay. Don't you once say, didn't you once say that his theory conforms to the F equals QV times B formula? Who are you talking about? Drag is an issue. Yes, I've already explained drag, but let's not get into it. I also wonder if the expansion redshift could be explained by more particles coming from the center compared to the outer parts of the universe. I don't think that would be the issue. I don't think, I think the center of the universe might be a bullshit notion, actually. It's really hard to do any of this stuff because it's all based on thin evidence, and I don't really have that much interest in Big Bang stories and all that kind of crap. I don't think the truth lies there. And we know that this is kind of bullshit. I mean, they're guessing at how far away things are, and it's a circumstantial guess. It's not a guess based on empirical data. It's a guess, and some of their guesses seem a little wacky, right? Where especially the lensed images. I mean, they don't even make any sense, right? I mean, they see a galaxy that's 5,000 times brighter than any galaxy we've ever seen before in a lensed image. I mean, all kinds of wacky shit like that. So I don't know why everybody is so fascinated with those questions. I find it totally uninteresting. But clearly, there could be lots of reasons why light, as it travels through space, gets altered because it hits electrons on its way, little clear electrons, transparent electrons, transparent atoms. And so it's readmitted in the same direction, but it's shifted because it goes through these electrons on its way. There could be lots of explanations for why there's redshift. I mean, I just thought of a one that's kind of weird, but in a sense, we're gravitationally moving towards the center of the Earth. So theoretically, we're accelerating towards the center of the Earth. So we're theoretically running away. Every direction we look is going to be looking like we're moving away because we're accelerating towards the center of the Earth. Yeah. But I don't know why that would make things further away redshift more. I have to think about that. But their whole notion of what redshift is, which is this idea that I make the light's already on its way, and I change the distance of how far things are, and all of a sudden the light also stretches. So their theory is that the photons are already on their way somewhere. I'm on my way going, I'm going from point A to point B. So I'm already on my way. And at some point, point B goes further away. And somehow that makes my light stretch. Now, does that make sense to you? Doesn't make any sense to me. You can't retroactively redshift. It has to happen at the source. It has to. Either the receiver is moving or the source is moving. But once the light's on its way, you can't do anything to it. Except the receiver can move. But whatever the source does isn't going to matter. So it just doesn't make any sense. Their theory sucks. Their theory about everything sucks. Can't argue with you because you're so slow scrolling. I don't see how it could possibly matter how slowly I scroll. And part of that is what? I shouldn't be thorough. Okay, I should give less than complete answers. And somehow that will make the conversation better if I give less than complete answers. I don't think so, asshole. All right. We can't argue in Skype. We can argue in Skype. No, I can argue right here. If you have a microphone, I can let you in this room. You have a microphone? I'll send you the link to this room. Give me your email address. We'll send an email to ds@draftphysics.com. I'll send you the link to this room, and you can get in here right now. Or at any time you wish. You tell me what time you're available. I'll open the room. You can get in. Yeah, Gary, it's like a religious person saying you haven't read the whole Bible. Well, it's worse than this because this guy hasn't watched any of my videos. And he's telling me I don't know something. I mean, it's just sort of horseshit. As if that means anything. They're not guessing. They're looking at light and measuring its intensity. So again, you're saying that isn't based on assumptions when I've actually seen the astronomer say, well, we really can't do this candle power thing. It doesn't tell us enough. So brightness is a really bad way to tell distance because something twice as bright as something else could be 15 times further away. I mean, it doesn't give you enough information. And that's all they really have is brightness. All right. Let's see. Yeah, Gary, it's like, okay, we did that. They're looking at light and measuring its intensities. Wait, never mind. My comment about expansion was retarded. From observations, everything is moving away from everything. Yeah, I just don't know how to interpret that. I mean, observations is the key word here, right? So it has to be observations from an environment where you're not being accelerated. That should be the first rule, is that you're not being accelerated when you're doing your observing. But it's still a tricky question. I mean, we're not even talking about redshift, right? This is part of the canard of this whole thing. We're talking about things where they collect enough light to see the spectrum of what they assume the thing is made out of, hydrogen, helium, blah, blah, blah. And so they're looking at the lines, the emission lines, and the emission lines are in the wrong place. They're redshifted. So this gets a little more complicated than people are recognizing. This isn't just about seeing something as red or blue. It's about seeing emission lines in the wrong place. As if that means anything. Okay, they're not guessing. Okay, yes, they are. Wait, never mind. Okay, did that. You are claiming we should see less redshift. I'm not making any claims, but anyway, are you claiming we should see less redshift is we were observing the universe from a place far away from the planet or a star? No, I'm not making a claim. I'm just talking off the top of my head, just trying to figure out mechanisms that would be affecting either the emitter or the receiver. Because in my opinion, whatever shifting has happening, it has to be happening to the emitter or the receiver. There's no shifting the light when it's in motion, unless you believe in a stretchable ether. That can't happen. If the receiver is moving, of course. Yeah. Clearly, the receiver is the tricky word, right? Because I could argue that if there is these little tiny molecules in space, little bits of atoms, they're all receiving the photons, right? And if they have any motion, they'll impose a shift based on their motion. So they could be red shifting. All right. Gary, you say that in the context of gravity, the Earth is constantly absorbing force bits energy. Is that correct? Yes, in a very yin-yang way. It's absorbing acceleration in both directions. So here's the sphere. There's force coming from all directions. It absorbs acceleration, which means it absorbs a bit of energy, moving the speed of light. It absorbs the bit of energy. The bit of energy does not leave the sun. This bit of energy goes in. It does not leave the sun. So the sun has absorbed 2 bits of momentum in the opposite direction, which makes it absent energy in all directions, which means it's not producing pressure going out because it absorbed it going in. So it absorbs energy going in, traps it, and so then the energy doesn't come back out. So there's an absence of out from the sun. And the byproduct of that absorption is pressure and heat. Okay. Gary, you say that the context of gravity, Earth is constantly absorbing force bits energy. Is that correct? Yes, it's correct. Whoa. I wish this thing was, I wish it had numbers on it so I could just make sure this didn't keep bouncing around. Oh, good. I'll check my email. Let's see. My company's expansion is retarded. Okay, let's see. It goes all the way back here. I don't know what the hell's going on here. Okay. Yes, I have a mic. Good. All right. So the room link. And get that. Wrong one. Where's the room? Here's the room. And the link. And copy. And you can't see that, so it ain't going to matter. Close. Can I check email in here? Yeah. Yeah, I have to load my email programs. I don't think it's loaded. Yeah, pain in the ass. Inbox. That looks like an inbox. Okay. Ooh, I don't know if I can get the draft science in here, draft physics. No, hopefully it came through. I'd like to join the talk. There we go. No, didn't have anything in the text though. Reply. So that should be you, right, asshole? From your favorite racist Jew kid. No, that's obviously not somebody I want to give this link to. Yeah, so that ain't gonna work. Let's see. Any of this nonsense. Involve myself. I wish I had never involved myself in any of this nonsense. I wonder what that's about. Huh. Doesn't tell me much, that email. All right. Well, anyway. I don't see any drafts. No, it's not going to be in there. Let's see. Should be forwarded. Oh, fuck. I'll have to send it to. Yeah, sorry. This got more complicated than I thought it would. All right. I'll send it to myself. That's the way to do it. All right. I shall send the link to me. Yeah, and I can get it on my other computer and send it to you. Yeah, that should work. Oh, rubbish there. Why aren't you sending it to? Oh, I gotta put me in here. And let's see. It should work. And send. All right. Sorry for the delay. Technical issues and shit and such. Yeah, I get all my mail and different computers. I ought to clean that up. Okay, that was me. Oh, your favorite racist Jew kid. I don't, well, I'm not, why would I respond to somebody who calls themselves your favorite racist Jew kid? Do I want to let you into my room? Yeah, I mean, what are you, retarded? No, fuck off. You're not getting in. You already had your questions answered. Just reject the answer. The energy accounts for the gravity in the form of potential energy being converted into kinetic energy. So again, all right. So obviously that's not an answer for where the energy came from. So to say that gravity explains gravity, that's just like saying the bent fabric argument. Gravity pushes things into the well, and that explains gravity. You're just using gravity to explain gravity, and that's just horseshit. All right, I did check my mail, and so what? I should just block you now? I don't understand. I mean, I'm really, I'm really not going to play some kind of bullshit game with fucking assholes who have to play this fucking racial crap. You can't grow up. That's your problem, fuckhead. Maybe it's the Energizer Bunny pushing the force bits, and that's why they continue to be moving through the God frame at the speed of light. Whatever. Dick. Earlier today, I heard Ryan Falk, who cares, talk about how progress in science is made by people who are pig-headed enough to go against the status quo. I don't even know if that's true. You see, that's what I meant by Gary argues like a creationist. Exactly how so, retard? Anyway, you're done. I mean, I can't make it any simpler in terms of drawing you a picture of the trampoline pushing the electron, explaining exactly what a rebound force is, and that's creationism. So drawing an explicit picture, making explicit claims about the explicit facts is creationism. Yeah, I don't think it is. All right. Okay, I can answer your question. I just want to see your response. We saw that, by the way. Or what? LOL. Experiment. All you can do is start with objects and state the rules. This is true for all theories. It's just more mush talk. All you can do is start with objects and state the rules. I don't know. But what good does that do in any kind of conversation? I just don't understand. They're saying the rule is it just happens. The bent space does it. I mean, the point is that a fair definition of a rule? It just does. I mean, I could say it just does. Photons move perpetually the speed of light in a straight line until they hit an electron. Now, I say they just do that forever, and it just does. There's no why. There's just, it does it forever. That's what it does. But do you think you can say that for somehow little material body creates proportional amount of vacuum cleaner sucking, and somehow the sucking of all the little atoms together adds up to a big suck, and proportionally somehow the sucking creates a multiple of suck. And that somehow makes sense. Is that Thunderbird? Yes, that's right. Email. That doesn't account for the actual mechanism that's causing it. What are the need to know basics of physics? Well, that's what's sort of the argument here. Is I'm saying that one of the basics should be conservation of energy. And so if you're going to propose that something happens, like magnets are creating a field around them, you have to explain where the energy came from to make the field. And if you're going to say that the Earth moves, you're going to have to explain where the energy came from to move it. There is an equilibrium that is imbalanced due to the pressure of matter converting force. Presence of matter converting force. Capturing force is probably the better word to use. You can't really create an imbalance till you capture it. I'm new here, by the way. It's very exciting. Superior Mind, how about you answer my previous question about kinetic and potential energy? Question probably wasn't very interesting. I don't remember it. What question? Yes, I'm kind of curious what the question was also. He says the Earth is absorbing energy. Yes, and I explained it in sort of detail. But in Newtonian mechanics, the energy returns to the original energy when the Earth completes its orbit. Well, obviously a circle. Okay, so I mean, obviously, if I just did this, so here's the circle, and I just do one radius, well, that's unbalanced. And if I do one radius this way, well, that's unbalanced. If I do one radius this way, that's unbalanced. But you can sort of get that when I do one radius this way, and I do a radius this way, that ends up balanced. Now, obviously, from Newton's perspective, doing this and doing this looks like zero. But clearly, from what we can observe, that zero means the sun is hot as hell. And that zero means the Earth is hot as hell. The core is melted, okay? So obviously this plus this isn't zero. This was kept, and this was kept. The energy has been stored in the Earth. And the evidence of the storage of the energy is the fact that the center of the Earth is fucking melted. Get it? So saying Newton says to that, Newton had no idea, first off, and Newton was only measuring motion. So an absence of motion doesn't mean an absence of energy. Just like this battery can collect energy and there won't be any obvious motion. The battery won't be flying all bouncing. It won't just sit on my desk going like, I'm full of energy. No, it'll be full of energy without me seeing it, but it's there. All right, check your email. I already did that. You'll see Ekeri. Well, I'm just saying, I already looked for an email and it didn't have a rational title to it. I mean, what do you want me to say? Okay, it was a nickname. Well, what do you want me to say? You're part of a troll club? All right, I'll send the link. What the hell? But, I think we know what's going to happen. Nothing good. Where the hell is the respond button? Somebody stole it. Oh, I have to get my email first. All right, there's the link. Copy the link, and I'll send it to Ishi. Atari. Akari. Okay. Reply. There it is. All right. Paste. So go ahead. Give you the opportunity sent. Yeah, that's all I have to do, right? Yeah. All right. Sorry for the delay. There's no evidence that space bends. There's no evidence that space is something other than nothing. That's the thing, right? So there's no evidence that space is something. There is evidence that space is nothing.
Hi, can you hear me?
Unfortunately, it appears I can. No, it's not. No insult intended.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, then we've completed half of our task here.
Yes.
Well, yeah, you're just using your mic anyway, right? So
yeah.
Okay.
So how's it going?
I don't need to give you video. Oh, I just it's going okay. Let me just turn down my mic.
Okay.
Speakers because you're too loud at the moment for me. But
Take
anyway,
your time.
Yeah, it'll only take a moment. Okay, good enough. All right. So, all right. So you took physics.
Yeah.
Did you graduate?
I'm graduating in December.
Okay.
And I'm actually studying electrical engineering. So.
All right. So you only took like 2 years of physics, and the rest of it is all electrical crap. Right?
No. I've actually been in school since I was in 2012.
Well, I mean, you're not doing postgraduate, are you?
No, I just want to get a bachelor's degree, and then I'm just gonna,
Well, I just mean usually when you go for a specialty, you only do 2 years of the physics because you don't need to be a specialist in all the other crap. Right?
Oh yeah, prerequisites take about 2 years, and then after 2 years,
yeah,
that's when
you do your specialty then.
Yeah, kind of like.
All right. Well, anyway, close enough. All right. Well, that's good enough. I mean, it's the electricity part is really tied to the magnetism part, which is really an interesting subject. So.
Yeah, and kind of, I don't really blame you because, I mean, you barely know the math behind things, right?
No, well, I don't barely know it. So no, that's horseshit. No, I don't do calculus. I don't derive equations. I don't find them very interesting anyway because they derive a bunch of equations and they never solve the actual equations. Okay, so it's sort of horseshit. So I could tell you, like, they do the two-slit math. They very rarely do any precise comparison. So I could argue that I could ask you the simple question, why in the photon experiment why are the bars so harsh in the photon experiment? That is, they don't gradually go from light to dark, light to dark. So when you have the electron experiment, it goes gradually light to dark, light to dark, light to dark. But when you use photons, they're very harsh lines. So why is your mathematics not predicting correctly? Obviously, you can't say the math is perfect because the math isn't predicting the outcome. Because the two outcomes are different with the same math.
Well, everything has to do with probability when you go in that kind of scale.
Doesn't matter. No. The prediction of the math is for a gradual pattern. That's what the math says. There's no difference. The math is exactly the same for the electron experiment as the proton one because they just used the de Broglie thing to say that there's the frequency is momentum. And otherwise, it's exactly the same math.
Frequency is just... Well, momentum is a scalar quantity that defines mass and velocity, and frequency is just the amount of cycles per second a system has. So,
well, I'm not going to argue. You say you've taken physics. You know who de Broglie is, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and de Broglie was basically iconized by Einstein. Like, thank you for saving the day. Because basically you created this little cheat where we can turn all momentum into a frequency, which gets rid of part of this wave-particle duality problem, because now we can turn everything into a wave. You do understand that's what de Broglie did, essentially, right? De Broglie basically says we all have a wave function. It's just that my frequency is is 1 times 10 to the minus 7 million or something. I mean, I have a hugely high frequency. Okay, it's a gigantic. I mean, my wavelength is a tiny number, right? So that's all de Broglie is saying, right? Is every physical object in the universe has a wavelength, and it's calculated based on their mass and momentum.
Okay.
So I'm saying that it's the same math for the two-slit experiment. Because of de Broglie, they use exactly the same math, and they're basically saying electrons behave the same way as photons. And I'm just saying that the outcome of the two experiments are clearly different. And I'm saying, how can you say the math is an accurate description of reality when it's describing two fundamentally different outcomes?
Well, as I said before, in small scales, probability is necessary to predict its, momentum and position. While in a large scale, you could actually predict things pretty easily because
again, but that's exactly the opposite of the outcome, right? In reality, the higher the frequency, the higher the resolution. That is, the more you can see. So with visible light photons, you can see a lot more than you could see with, say, radio waves because of the higher frequency. You would agree, right? Higher resolution.
You could only
photons should have higher resolution than electrons, not lower resolution. You should be more accurate with photons, not less accurate.
You could only see at a certain part of the electromagnetic spectrum. You can't see every light that there is in the universe. So,
well, I mean, obviously, we can't see anything over certain small wavelengths. But again, obviously, we can see the long wavelengths. So to say we can't see what? We can't see wavelengths that are 10,000 years long, obviously, because we haven't built an antenna for a 10,000 year long wavelength. But I'm just saying, where's our limitation mechanically? We don't have a limitation. And it's still, you didn't get to my resolution argument. The photons have higher resolution. That is, they should be revealing the truth with less noise because they have a higher precision. So the point is that in the photon experiment, the bars are clearly not proportionally gradual from light to dark. They don't gradually get lighter and gradually get darker. There's no linear, it's not proportional to the mathematics. The mathematics says it should be a sine wave. There's no sine wave.
See, I don't think you're using your terms correctly. Because I know that at one point you said that pressure is force.
In videos, I've shown the experiment. I've shown the patterns. For you to say that I'm not using my terms correctly is just horseshit. Okay, I'm saying there's absolutely no evidence that the math is accurately describing. It's an approximation. The math is not accurate. The math is not describing the causes. The math is not correct.
The math is there to predict your system.
Again, it's not predicting. Do you understand that word? I'm claiming your math doesn't predict because the same exact formula creates two different outcomes in the electron experiment and the photon experiment, and the mathematics says the outcomes should look identical.
Yeah, but why are you yelling? I'm not arguing with you. I'm just debating you.
You're just arguing. You're just saying that somehow we can keep doing this bullshit where we tell you the truth based on our ton of evidence. And I'm saying all of your evidence is garbage. It's terrible evidence. It's not a volume in volume, quantity and quality. Your evidence is
so you're basically saying it's only garbage because you don't understand it.
No, I'm basically saying I
think that's what it is.
I'm illustrating how it's.
I think that's what it is.
Well, okay, you can say that's what it is, and I'll just keep showing how you're liars when you say that your math is accurate, because I'm pointing out how the two patterns are not accurate. And I'm also pointing out something quite obvious, which is it's kind of ludicrous to say because something has a velocity, we're going to pretend it has a frequency.
Wait,
okay, because you have momentum doesn't mean you have a frequency. If I shoot an electron at 50 miles an hour, the electron doesn't have a frequency. It's idiotic.
Yes,
it's idiotic.
Okay, listen. So do you agree that an electron has a frequency and a, well, do you believe that it's a particle in a wave?
No, of course I don't. I think it's retarded.
Okay, so do you think it has a frequency?
Of course, it has a frequency.
Okay,
When I
every
shoot
wave.
that,
Okay,
let me
then
finish
every
the
wave,
sentence,
every wave,
fucktard. Let me finish the
every
fucking
wave,
sentence,
every wave
liar.
has a
Let
every
me
wave.
finish the sentence, liar. It has a frequency when I shoot it at a frequency. When I shoot voltage behind it, then the voltage has a frequency. Then, of course, the electron moves with a frequency. But when I don't shoot it with a frequency, when I put a DC current behind an electron, it doesn't move with a frequency. So if I don't make it move at a frequency, it doesn't have a frequency.
So you just said an electron has a frequency, but guess, and you said
no,
that.
I didn't say that. I said a qualified statement that if you give it a frequency, it has a frequency. That is, if you push it with a force that has a frequency, the electron reveals that frequency. The electron does what the force behind it tells it to do. Electrons don't do anything on their own.
Every wave has a frequency.
Voltage. If I alternate the voltage, the electron has a frequency. If I don't alternate the voltage, the electron has no frequency.
The electron has a wave and a frequency.
Well,
it's a wave. So. It's a wave,
and you have absolutely no evidence for that. Show me the evidence.
It's a wave. It acts like a wave and a particle.
Show me the evidence.
The double slit experiment.
No, and I've already done that, okay? I've got like at least 35 videos on this channel on the double slit experiment demonstrating how that doesn't prove anything.
Oh, yes, it does.
No, it doesn't. I just point out how your math isn't consistent. The math doesn't answer the question accurately. Well, it doesn't predict the single slit experiment. It doesn't. Okay, why don't you explain Huygens? All right, here's a simple question for you. In the single slit experiment, Huygens says there's two waves. Then in the double slit experiment, Huygens says there's only two waves. Why aren't there four waves? If a single slit creates two waves, and I have two single slits, why don't the two single slits each create two waves, and therefore I have four waves in the double slit?
There's two openings, so therefore there should be two waves.
There's one opening in the single slit. Why isn't there one wave?
There's constructive and constructive interferences.
We already know those words. Yes, that has nothing to do with how many waves the experiment creates. The single slit creates two waves. If I put two single slits, if I put a single slit over here and I put a single slit over here, right? They create four total waves, don't they? If I have a single slit experiment over here and I have a single slit experiment way over here, you don't think that single split it creates only one wave, right? You're saying it creates two and the waves interfere with each other. Well, the
reason it's called a double slit experiment.
Well, let me finish, fuckhead.
Well, why don't you let me finish? Because
no, I'm talking right now, aren't I? Yeah, so I'm explaining an experiment. And
what about that time? What about the time
when I haven't finished explaining the fucking experiment? That seems like an insane interruption.
What about the time when I was talking and then you interrupted me?
Because you were accusing me of saying I said electrons have a frequency when I never said that. I said a qualified statement. You were trying to put words in my fucking mouth, you lying prick.
No,
That's
they
why
do have
I
a frequency.
interrupted you.
So
I will not accept false premises or straw man arguments. If you're going to make straw man arguments or false premises, we're not going to have much of a conversation, fucker.
So how many times have you been in a psych ward?
All right, so there you've lost the argument, right? So the Huygens question defeated them again. So the simple thing is asked, right? Explain to me why a single slit creates two waves, and yet two single slits only create two waves. And there's no rational explanation because there can't be any rational explanation because their theory is made of shit.
It's called a double slit experiment because it has two openings.
Yeah, we don't. So what?
Right?
The single slit has one opening. How does it create two waves?
What do you mean?
What do I no there's no what do I mean? The fucking formula says there's two waves. That's what causes the interference. One photon goes in, two waves come out. That's the theory, right, jackass?
Well, I could only think that one wave comes out.
How does it interfere with itself then?
Well, if you know for sure that
look, it's a single slit. Do I have to draw it for you? Single slit. We know that
There
the
you go, interrupting me.
typical argument is the single slit creates two wave functions. The two wave functions go through space, interfere with themselves to create the bar pattern. All right, two waves. One photon goes in, two wave functions come out. The two wave functions interfere with each other and create the pattern. That's the causal argument.
No, I don't think you're right.
Well, then we're done, right? There's no premise here. I just accurately described the single slit
A
experiment.
double slit experiment
I
creates
just
two waves.
accurately described the single slit experiment.
It's funny because you don't understand the math. That's why you're too stupid and you can't argue with it.
No conversation, all right? Again, I've given you your chance to make a rational argument. You can't make it, so we're done. This is a waste of time.
Bye.
Fuck off. Just fuck off.
Nigger.
Yeah, you resorted to that, of course. So we knew that was coming. Something was coming. All right, so I will jump to the more recent comments. Wrong. The double slit pattern is two single slit patterns interfering. Well, I'm not going to argue with what it is. The point is what Huygens creates. And in the single slit, Huygens creates two waves. And then somehow in the double slit, Huygens only creates two waves again. Somehow it doesn't create four. And you have no rational explanation for that dichotomy. that is a more accurate word for that fakery. All the spectrometry calculations are evidence of Schrodinger's math. I guess. How so? I mean, that's just, again, a statement. Oh, I made a statement. Schrodinger's math proves the spectrometry calculations are evidence of something. I don't think they are. Nobody's arguing that electrons aren't in specific energy tension. That is, that they aren't in something that might be called a whatever those rings are. You know, I'm not arguing that. The electrons come in clumps around atoms. There's a clump here at this distance, there's a clump at this distance, and there's a clump at this distance. Yeah, electrons come in clumps. Let's see, it comes back as heat. He outright comes back to the heat problem. I don't know what that means. He already admitted that extra energy does into heat. I mean, you really can't do better typing than this. And then says this is why the Earth core is hot. He already admitted that the extra energy does into heat. Amazing. The electrons display the interference pattern, dipshit. So again, who was arguing that electrons don't display the pattern? The whole point is the electrons have a gradual sine wave pattern and photons don't. And they should. The mathematics says they should gradually get lighter, gradually get darker. And if you look at the two slit pattern especially, they're really bars of light. Wrong, Gary. The math does predict the patterns. No, it doesn't. The electrons have a smaller wavelength. Doesn't matter. So you can't get the simple argument that was made. The difference is in the structure of the pattern. It's clearly on and off in the photons. And it's clearly gradually on, gradually off in the electron experiment. Let's see. He admits himself that's enough energy to make a giant flame. So again, I'm sick of you saying this admit stuff. I have not admitted anything. I've explained exactly what the difference is. Um, Fuck you, straw manning bitch. He comes back with the heat problem. I didn't come. It's not. Why did I say heat was a problem? Where did I say that? The Earth is absorbing enough energy to move around the sun. So where's the evidence of that? The Earth absorbing energy. Where's the source of the energy? You're still not explaining to me where the energy comes from. That's the point, you lunatic. That's enough energy to increase it by hundreds of degrees per second. That doesn't even make sense. 100 degrees per second? What are you, crazy? Degrees per second? I've never heard of a degree per second. No, they're both consequences of the wave-like nature of light. There's no wave-like nature of a photon. It's a delusion you people have. Photons don't spread. Photons don't do anything like a wave. There's no wave nature to a photon. It goes from point A to point B in a straight line till it hits an electron. And then it gets deflected by the electron's momentum. And that's it. There's no wave-aton. Waves diffract and interfere in exactly the same way as photons. There's no exact anything. So show me the single slit wave. Make a single slit experiment on the ocean and show me how the waves interfere with themselves. Because guess what? It's not going to happen, shithead. There's no parallel to the single slit experiment in wave mechanics. You're just picking the experiment that looks a little bit like it and saying, see, one experiment looks like it, so it must be true. And you're ignoring all the evidence that's counter. So all the counter evidence you're ignoring, and you're just keeping the evidence that confirms your theory. And you're saying you're doing good rational science. That's junk science. So Gary has to lie. All right, I'm just going to block you. And then he accuses scientists of lying as saying they hide the single slit pattern existence. And as proof, he shows a video of a scientist talking about the single slit pattern. I don't know. I don't lie about anything, so fuck you. I'm not going to accept that. I stand by everything I've said in my videos. I haven't lied to anybody about anything ever, you fucking cunt. So just fuck off. Meat wad. In small scales, God did it. I mean, why don't you just fuck off, NS Courage guy? What do you think I'm going to do with a statement like that? You have to be, you have to recognize this audience is full of morons. And so this little bit of satire, they're not going to get any satire. Just say things you mean and say them directly. Don't veil them in jokes or anything. All right, so we'll just move on to the current shit. All right, none of this means anything. Heat involves particles going in incoherent directions. No, heat involves particles going, period. There, now you're done. Heat involves particles going. Heat is caused by pressure. The pressure is caused by particles moving. That's what causes pressure. Little bits moving the speed of light cause pressure. If you remove all the little bits moving the speed of light between two things, you reduce the pressure, you reduce the heat. Well, I mean, look, he says this, he studied electrical engineering, so why would they teach him QM? I mean, QM is taught as a, like I said, the first 2 years of you get general physics, and so you're going to be taught quantum mechanics. And there's frankly a lot of quantum mechanics when you get into electrical, which is magnetic. So, it's, yeah, I mean, quantum mechanics really is quantum electrodynamics, huge connection. It's just funny how these people, they believe anything these professors say and all that kind of crap. And I always find it with the Feynman thing is so weird because Feynman in one of those lectures, in the Auckland lecture, he directly states photons aren't a wave. I mean, he says it out loud. They're a corpuscle. He basically also says later in the video how they move from point A to point B in a straight line, and that the probability thing has to be thought of in abstract terms. It can't be thought of as in mechanical terms. So he basically throws out Huygens and wave theory and basically just argues for just do the math. Don't think about the cause. Because in his mind, there's no way to reconcile the fact that the photon is a corpuscle and it can't do the wave thing. It just can't. It's not a wave. So obviously the probability is being caused by something else. And they, no one talks about it. They just pretend that Feynman was one of these, believers in the wavicle. Superior mind, do you agree with Gary that beam splitters make one beam 20x larger in the experiment? Well, do you understand that the beam splitter they used in the experiment was a half silvered mirror? Do you understand that? So, I mean, do you understand that the single slit experiment, which we were just talking about, obliges the light to diverge when it goes through the gaps in the silver? The gaps in the silver are very small. That means the light has to be diverged. It has to spread. Do you understand that the light that goes through between the silver gets spread? The light that reflects doesn't get spread. Can you understand that? Why is that premise? Why are you incapable of accepting that logical premise? Gary, have you seen? I'm sure there's not these. Well, there's a million films of bullshit everywhere. Why should I bother with every bullshit that's out there? But Gary, have you seen those films that restrict light, but then when you put two together, the full light comes in? Sorry, I don't know what that means, but that's polarization. Maybe you're talking about. And you don't get all the light. You get 50% of the light. Wait, which is the photon and which is the corpuscle? The point is Feynman stated, like Newton, okay, he defended Newton's conclusion. He said overtly Newton was right for the wrong reason, but he basically said Newton was right. It's a corpuscle. Photons are clumps. That's what he said. They're clumps, not waves. Okay, do you understand the difference between a clump and a wave? Feynman argued clearly photons are clumps. They're not waves. They arrive as clumps. They come in a clump of energy. You can't have a little bit of a photon or a half a photon or any of that kind of crap. It's a clump. Light is obviously a particle. See, that's the tricky thing. I mean, I guess it's not obvious. From my perspective, there's no way to describe it except as a particle. But clearly it's not obvious, because if it was obvious, all these people wouldn't get, be doing all this wave nonsense. So somehow they think there's some kind of thing doing this in two different fields. Two fields are doing this thing, and that's a photon, double wavy, blah, 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 blah. And it has a certain length of length. The snaky thingy is certain amount of length to the snaky thingy. Yeah, that doesn't make any sense to me, but okay. So clearly it's not obvious to them. But yeah, it's obvious to me. It's a little hunk of shit moving really fast. And so that's what it is. It's a little BB moving the speed of light. And I can change how distant the BBs are. And that's its wavelength, is the distance between the BBs. No response from his evasive fans. No response to what? Really does speak bot. What are they supposed to respond to? Or any of his inner idiot fans? What do we, Superior Mind, do you agree with Gary that the beam splitter makes one beam 20x larger in the MM experiment? I don't know about approximately 20x. I don't know. This might be 500x, actually. It's clearly diverging for a huge amount of time in the experiment compared to the other beam. So, yeah, I mean, do you really think that Superior Mind thinks otherwise? No, I don't think he thinks otherwise. They travel in frequency streams as clumps. The frequency thing makes them think it's waves. Well, I mean, the point is that they travel in lots of different ways, and that's what the joke is here, is that obviously they also travel as gravity. But anyway, I would argue there's no evidence for nothing, but there is evidence for space. So that doesn't make any sense. So, and there's this wordplay. Space has a quality. It says you. I'm saying the word doesn't mean anything. So if you're going to say space is a fabric or space is a something, then you can't say it's a nothing also. It's a nothing something. I mean, that's just more duality bullshit. The nothing something, the something nothing. Just fucking destroy what the words mean. They no longer have any meaning at all. Nothing has no quality as it does not actually exist. Well, I'm just saying the empty space between two photons, for example, or two electrons, or the empty space between, say, the Earth and the Moon. If I took out all the little atoms and any stray electrons and any stray photons, you think that empty space is something. I'm saying, no, it's nothing. There's nothing there. So anyway, electrons' surface cause the pattern since they will interact with photons. Point is the electrons on the surface, not electron surfaces. But okay. I just wish you'd get, look, the point is not, okay, oiga. And MM experiment has other flaws too. Well, I mean, the point is she wants you to answer this stupid little question directly. Not that I disagree with their conclusion. I don't know how they could have a conclusion when they couldn't do the experiment. It's idiotic to think they can measure something they can't measure. But okay, fine. I think it's really stupid. Well, I'm just saying either your quantum mechanics means something or it means nothing. Either Heisenberg is right or Heisenberg is wrong. If you're going to defend it, it has implications. You can't pretend the implications don't exist. We know from the single and double slit experiment that I can send single photons into the experiment. All right, so I would ask you, what do you think's happening in your interferometer? Do you think a single photon, if I shove it in there, the single photon will travel both legs of the experiment and then recombine to create the interference pattern? Or do you think different photons are interfering with each other? These are really important questions, and you're pretending they're not important questions, but they are. And they deserve some sort of rational answer. And you're just playing word games to get around the implications of them. I'm just saying, where am I wrong in describing the fact that a half-silvered mirror essentially creates a diffraction gradient. It essentially creates a piece of film with a bunch of single slits in it, and that those single slits diffract the light, that is, spread the light. That will be the implication of the photons going through between the mirror, between the silver dots. The light that goes between the silver dots will start spreading. It's just a fact. You either have an argument explaining why it's not factually based or not a reasonable statement. Why is it not reasonable for me to assert that that's what happens? And as I demonstrate on my porch, it's obvious that that's what's happening because I created the same ringed pattern, the perfect interferometer pattern, without recombining any photons, by just putting dirt on the surface of a piece of glass. I created the pattern. That should tell you something. Just so they keep believing in fairy tales. Well, I'm just saying, it's clearly they don't spend any time looking backward. So they just keep, it's like they have a junker car, and it's like they don't redo anything. They just put some new device on. So if something breaks, like the steering wheel, they just put a new steering wheel on. All right, they keep the old broken one, they just stick a new one on. So they just keep adding crap to the monster. They never go back to the drawing board and say, let's redesign this piece of shit. So that's the real problem. They can never look backward. They always keep looking for the new wavicle, you know, the new Higgs boson God particle. It's a heuristic meta argument, but it really does emphasize how you have no idea what you even imply. So that's your answer, you lying piece of shit cunt. I mean, I make a direct statement to you. How has anything I said, where have I made a logical error in pointing out how small spaces invoke Heisenberg, which invokes the spreading of light? How is that incorrect? Here she is recommending one of my videos. I don't understand you at all. Linda, the meanings of words matter. You can't just screw around and change them when you suit you. I don't even know what the fuck she's arguing, frankly. I mean, I can't make it any clearer. I mean, I could just state the obvious and she doesn't have a reply to the obvious. Linda, do you think if I put a single photon into an interferometer, do you think the wave function of the single photon will travel both arms of the device and recombine to create a position in the ringed pattern? Do you think the interferometer would work if I use single photons? Linda, the meaning of words matter. You just can't screw. Okay, we did that. Physics is not very accommodating of the idea that space as an immaterial medium, because physics is concerned with that which is physical. Well, I'm sorry, it's just about accurate descriptions. And if you think accurate descriptions are fairy tales, magical forces, it's all just woo. So fine. I don't think that's what an accurate description is going to look like. An accurate description, in my opinion, is going to be an accurate description of causes. And these aren't accurate descriptions of causes. Bent geometry. It's not the right answer. All right, so now we have the Mach-Zelanger experiment. It's supposed to be the proof of something. A pile of crap. I don't remember what it was, frankly, but it doesn't answer any of my questions. So it's just evasions, right? Either Heisenberg is a real concept or not. Just admit it. You think Heisenberg doesn't apply to half-silvered mirrors. Just say it if that's what you believe. Let's see. No, draft science at certain threshold. Oh, here we go again. When the wavelength is larger than the slit holes, I think, the diffraction gradient will not have beams going to the sides. Well, I'm just saying that, well, where's your evidence that their half-silvered mirror was anything other than a half-silvered mirror where, you know, the squares of silvering weren't this big. There's a big square of silver, big square of silver, big square of silver. They didn't half silver it with giant 2-inch squares of silver. It was clearly half silvered like you do with spray paint, you know, little tiny dots of silver with little tiny spaces between the dots. So you're again just evading the question. There's no gimmick here. I'm saying the half-silvered mirror has very, very, very tiny distances between the silvering. That's the supposition. And that's what the wave math predicts. It doesn't predict any such thing. So again, that's just more horse shit. The wave math, as I've pointed out, doesn't have a rational prediction anywhere near it. Without its Huygens gimmick, it's got no hope of answering any questions at all. And again, just the way they say that, right? The wave math, you know. So Dick, good for you. The wave math only uses an angle, and it's a contrivance. Yes, the wave math is not wave math. There's no wave in the math. The math has a sign theta, no wave. An angle is what the math has in it. An angle. There is more than one hole. So what? How does that stop the divergence? If I make 17,000 little slits, again, that's a diffraction gradient. The light beams are still separated by a distance. You can't undo the fact that the separation, the pattern gets wider for each one of the slits. The light diverges. It's a fact. All right, there is more than one hole. That's why the Heisenberg principle doesn't apply. Oh, that's just nonsense. Sorry. You can't make that real. There's no physics teacher teaching that. So you're not going to get away with that crap. You have to show me the evidence for that. Show me one physics teacher saying that. Heisenberg doesn't apply for a diffraction gradient. Sorry, that's just absolute mush. So again, she's typing it in capital text. Yes, I'm not going to look it up now, but yes, I'm sure I've already done your Mach-Zelander bullshit and pointed out how it's a crock of crap. But again, just evade the experiment we're talking about and talk about some other kind of bullshit. Does Mach-Zelander use a half-silvered mirror? Is it a half-silvered mirror experiment? We're talking about what half-silvered mirrors do. We're talking about Michelson-Morley. We're not talking about Mach-Zelander. So just the same old evasion. Change the subject. Change the subject. Let's see. All right. The photon does interfere with itself. Okay, so you're saying a single photon goes into the interferometer, travels both lengths of the interferometer, that is the wave function not the photon, travels to both arms. Then the wave function combines into the telescope or whatever you're using as a receiver. You're saying that's how you understand it. I'm just saying, I find it laughable, but fine. I'll prove how that's just absolute crap. And I'll prove it on my porch when I've already done it. I proved I can make the pattern without any interference. Anyways, I must have missed the MZ. I don't know what that is, but anyway. Yeah, I didn't do Matt Zinlander in here. Again, she's just changing the subject. There is more than one hole, so the light is not confined to one space. Where he did that. People, do you seriously fail to understand this? What am I supposed to understand? You're saying a diffraction gradient doesn't spread light. Well, I can prove that it does. I have one here. I can shine a laser beam through it and I'll get 7 or 8 little dots of light that in 1 meter will be more than a meter spread apart. That means that the light is diverging so fucking much that in just 1 meter distance, the light diverges into a huge amount of distance. Huge. So the more holes I make, the smaller I make the holes, the more the light diverges. So it's completely opposite of what you're arguing. Do you seriously fail to understand this? Yes, do you seriously fail to understand that? Gary, can I please ask you, do you know if the double slit experiment works with glass? I can't try. The point is the experiment is just about matter that absorbs photons versus. So that's really transparencies are irrelevant. The only thing that matters are the pigment. So the pigment can be in the glass, the pigment can be on the glass, the pigment can be without the glass. Now, the surfaces of glass, okay, are light absorbers. So clearly it's difficult when you talk about putting the surface of a piece of glass next to the surface of a piece of glass, because that surface will refract light. So you probably can create a 2-slit experiment with pieces of glass, okay, because you will create diffraction. But I don't know if exactly it's going to be because of the same reasons it happens through a plastic transparency, for example. Gary, can you please ask? Okay, no. Ergo, the Heisenberg principle doesn't apply. So again, I've already argued this. Of course, it always applies to anything that's a small opening. So I'm just saying you can't avoid it. So anything smaller than 0.5 millimeter is going to diffract photons. Just a fact. And nobody would half silver a mirror with reflective bits that were bigger than 0.5 millimeter. Nobody would do that. It would be irrational. All right, space can be interacted with. This goes nowhere. So I'm sorry, but that's just gibberish. If you have 2 cups, one empty or one only space in it, the one only full of water, pour the water into the other cup, you have transferred the space just like the water. It's just retarded, sorry. You can't use this idiotic argument because I have a something, I can make nothing. I can make more nothing, by displacing the nothing by putting a something in it. I mean, that's just retarded. You moved the something. I mean, moving the something doesn't mean I displaced the nothing. I mean, it's just bullshit. You can't transfer nothing because it does not actually exist. Nothing is a fairy tale contrivance. So again, you say there's ether or there's something else. Well, what is that ether made out of? So it's just Jello pudding all the way down. I don't know what's what. So there's pudding, or it's somehow connected, or so it's wavy pudding. What is this shit? And again, you haven't explained where the energy comes from anyway, so your pudding is useless. Your little jiggle pudding doesn't explain where the energy comes from. I don't know how you deal with all this crap, Gary. Well, I don't deal with it, do I? I obviously don't deal with it. I mean, obviously, it's fucking making me insane. I hate this planet. I hate people. I mean, I just can't stand this shit. I'm amazed by your theory, and I hope it gets recognition it deserves soon, because this is good stuff. Yeah, it's damn good stuff. 7 years I have to argue this shit with morons. The only good news is obviously the theory's gotten a hell of a lot better over the last 7 years. So it's a hell of a lot better theory now than it was 7 years ago. But yeah, it's just really irritating that people are so obnoxiously belligerent to the truth. Well, again, you're just going to keep arguing that a half-silvered mirror has centimeter-wide gaps in it or something, because they have to be very wide gaps. So I'm just saying, you're saying when somebody goes to half-silver a mirror, they're going to shoot a laser beam through. They're making the half-silvering into squares that are a half millimeter square. So all the gaps between the silvering are a half millimeter wide, which is like half the width of the laser beam. You do understand that, don't you? That can't possibly make any sense, that you can't possibly be splitting the light by doing that. Shit. That you still have the same problem. Your light is diverging. Oh, God, it's too stupid. If it was that easy, why wouldn't they just put a mirror on this side of the laser beam and no mirror on this side? There, I made a beam splitter. Why don't they just do that? If that's all that's required, I just let the light go this way and I reflect the light on this side, this half. So why do anything complicated at all? Why wouldn't that work if that's all you have to do to create a beam splitter? Just put the light on the edge of a mirror. There, I've done my job. Ugh, terrible. I understand everything you're saying. You understand nothing. So whatever. Space is an immaterial medium and is not energy. It's an immaterial medium. Well, again, you want to play this, look, we're done, okay? You're just going to keep quoting from the Bible. I mean, I just don't really, I'm just really uninterested in this non-proven declarations by you. It's just mush. Energy is eternal and does not come from. The point is, it has to be described as that there's a mechanism. Energy is movement. You have to explain what causes the movement. So even if you think there's an ether in space, what causes the ether to vibrate? That takes energy. You can't vibrate the ether without doing something to it, you idiot. Although the volume of space will have an equilibrium of directional force in it, non-frequency, I don't know what that means. I said a hole needs to be smaller than the wavelength. It doesn't matter. I'm just saying we already know the size for photons. We already know what size slit diffracts light in photons. So let's not have a visible light. All right, for visible light, it has to be around a half millimeter. So we already have that answer, or smaller. So anything a half millimeter or smaller is going to fucking cause the light to spread. So this argument's done. You're coming from a position of physics, and I'm coming from a position of philosophy. No, you're not. You're not doing philosophy. You're just doing religion. Philosophy is a rational science. Philosophy isn't, I'm just going to make up fucking 3 bear stories. 3 bear stories is not rational philosophy. That's theology. That's religiosity. That's crap. That's just pulling shit out of your imagination ass. That's not doing anything scientific or anything rational. Faith isn't rational. Belief without evidence isn't rational. There's no evidence for your statements. You have no evidence for the existence of a medium in space, whatever it's made of. Nothing, I don't care. You have no evidence that a medium exists. And even if one existed, it wouldn't answer any of the important physics questions, like where the energy comes from. What perturbates your stupid medium? Oh, I guess I could move this shit around. There, that looks cooler. We'll give up soon. I just don't know. This whole interferometer thing is just so interesting because people put so much stake in it. And here it proved the non-existence of the ether. And it's mostly ether theorists who are defending interferometers. And it's just so bizarre. You know, they should be the first ones to say, yeah, this experiment can't do what they claim it can do. When you keep making the slit width smaller, the side beams, whatever those are, there's no side beams, whatever a side beam is. Retracted for some reason. It was always just a single photon. The photon either is bent or is not bent. So if I do the experiment with single photons and we're going to make a pattern, the pattern will be made out of single dots arriving in locations. And over time, the single dots will equal the pattern. You know, these are the same people who actually think philosophy undergrids science. Well, I'm just saying that, yes, science is the only thing there is. The scientific method, that is, evidence draws conclusions. That's the scientific method. And the scientific method is to know the obvious, which is if two of my axioms are in direct contradiction to each other, wave, particle, I've got a problem. I need to fix that because it's stupid. That's what science is supposed to do. Science is supposed to collect evidence and then let the evidence point to new facts, new evidence. That's the way it's supposed to work. And the same thing happens in philosophy. Philosophy is just gleaning information about the world. You figure out, hey, there's a difference between things that feel and things that don't feel. Okay, yeah, I can tell there's a difference. And that's a value difference. See, it can matter what happens to me, but it can't matter what happens to this pen because it can't be harmed, can't have a bad day or a bad feeling, can't suffer. I can suffer. So, yeah, I have a philosophical understanding of a difference, of this concept of value. And now I can make all kinds of statements regarding the exchanges of value. And that's philosophy. But it all depends on making accurate statements about the world. So I would argue that it's an irrational statement for somebody to say the pen can feel. Because there's no evidence that it has a brain or has any of the components that make feeling possible. Other than the unequal splitting, I don't agree because I actually touched a beam splitter. Well, so did I. Actually made one on my porch. Do you have any other flaws to point out in the interferometer? Actually curious. Well, the only flaws would be the logical statements that can be made in that it's clearly a component of the function is optics. And as has been proven by other experiments in optics. That is, you can create internal reflections inside of glass by putting dirt on the surface of the glass or separating two surfaces of glass with dust. And the light will, when it comes in at certain angles, it will internally reflect and be trapped and then come out at certain probabilities. So its escape will be probabilistic based on the reflective index between the air layer and the glass. So as you change that reflective index, you change the probability of transmission through the glass or reflection back inside the glass. And that you can actually create exactly the same pattern as the interferometer pattern by just manipulating glass surfaces. And that should give you some reason to believe that this is more about optics than it's about distances. I have no evidence. Do I agree that energy is neither created nor destroyed? I have no videotape of the universe's history, so I cannot say what the universe does or does not do over zillions of years. I will say that there's no evidence that I've ever seen that a photon ever gets tired or ever wears out or ever dies, and that it just keeps going. And that when it's inside of matter, it's still going. And then when it's outside of matter, it's going. And it just keeps going. And that's what I would say is clear. So I don't see how you destroy a photon, and I don't see how you can create one. So yeah, I don't have any evidence that you can create it or destroy it. I don't see any evidence in the world indicating you can destroy or create a photon. Well, I mean, the brief description of the improvement, the theory started just with a gravity theory. And then I turned it into a magnetism theory that explained all of magnetism. And then I realized that also explains the nuclear force and charge. And so it became a unification theory, which was a huge, gigantic improvement. I mean, unification is huge. And yes, it unified all of physics. So yes, huge improvement. Yes, the epiphany was being able to realize that there's an external force. That's epiphany 1, external force. Epiphany 2 was realizing that if I give the force charge, that is, I give it two elements, black and white, red and blue, whatever, that those two elements could be filtered by a magnet, and that could create charge. And so that was the second gigantic leap. Because I was first trying to make charge out of spin and swirls like everybody else does. I was trying to figure out how something spins. I mean, superior mind was there for all this. I mean, we're talking about swirly shit and how we can make something swirl this way and that way and swirly, trying to figure out some way to make charge. Charge was like impossible to do because of this swirly shit was like really difficult to make charge. And then when I just realized that, no, I just make the photons, two kinds of photons, charge is explained. We're done. We don't have to do all this swirly shit. What is the best way for me to ask you about the philosophical stuff? Well, go on the Amendum channel. I do live rooms there. You can ask me philosophical questions. On your Amendum channel, ? Yes, that would be the place to go. Last time I tried, it was too crowded. Well, I'm sorry, but that's life. You can always email me if you have to. Be best to maybe get a microphone and then you can have a live conversation with me. I'll talk to you. So you agree energy is eternal? Well, I just qualified my statement. Didn't I just say that I don't know, pretty much? Didn't I say that? I don't know. I only know 10 billion years or so of evidence. I can't do more than that, can I? I mean, it seems obvious that the photons in proportion to the amount that we should expect from 10 billion light years away, the right amount we are receiving, so they didn't die on the way here. So I can assume that all the other photons that left that sun are still alive too. But I'm assuming. I don't have any special evidence to answer the question with. But so again, I don't know why you think you know, but I can't make those kind of declarations about 50 billion years ago or 50 trillion years ago what the universe looked like. I don't know. All effects have causes. So that's what energy is. I don't know what that's exactly what I'd say, but I guess an effect is something you notice, and change can only be noticed because change means distance changed. And so that's energy. Something moved. Physics, change in physics requires movement. I answered all your questions. I don't think you answered anything. By the way, like I said, the Heisenberg principle doesn't apply because, again, I'm not going to argue with it. That's just nonsense. A diffraction grating has more than one hole. Again, the fact is that whether it applies or doesn't apply, the physical fact is the evidence indicates that it produces a divergent energy spectrum. The energy diverges. That's the physical facts. Whether Heisenberg did it or not, the physical fact is the light diverges. So the photon is not confined to one point in space. Again, totally irrelevant to the fact that the light diverges. I loved hearing you talk about how complicated it would be to calculate the effects of gravity on the whole galaxy. Of course, there's too much shit in it, but they pretend it's just like a solar system. Yeah, well, I mean, it's pretty pitiful, really. I didn't realize they were doing such simplistic math to, in the fact that how they were doing their judgments of this speed problem, when the only way you could really understand the speed problem is to understand the fact that the density of the gravity is spread over a huge amount of distance. And so you can't use the model of a solar system because it doesn't at all look like a solar system. It's not physically like a solar system. Again, it's no different than diverging a single beam. It's doing exactly the same thing as the single slit experiment is doing. It's just doing it in a more confined way. But it's clearly just a bunch of collections of photons, right? Each individual photon that goes in to a diffraction gradient either bends to these specific locations. But one photon goes to one location. You do understand that, right? So clearly, it just doesn't matter whether the photon went between slit 5 and 8 or it went between slit 400 and 402. It will do the same thing. It will go to one of those 7 positions, period. So those positions are obviously diverging, and they're diverging, significantly diverging. Not a little bit of divergence, a huge amount of divergence because the slit width is so narrow. So you just keep evading the facts. That's a fact. Yeah, and it's not a fact I am the one disagreeing with. You're the one pretending that those beams don't diverge, that those photons aren't diverged to get to those locations. Each individual photon is significantly diverged. That's a fact. And even less photons go through the middle. So you almost have, a small percentage of the photons go to the center beam and a huge percentage go to the wider beams in the diffraction gradient. So you're actually more photons are diverging, not less. That's a fact. I don't know, it's just a simple argument. You think you can make 2 equal beams with a half silvered mirror. And I'm saying there's no way you possibly could understand those to be 2 equal beams because they're physically going through 2 different obstacle courses. They can't possibly be equal. What the hell do I do with my pen? Oh, here it is. See if the pen is recharged. Anyway, it's getting late. I should get the hell out of here. But it was good. There was some more participation, which is good. Sorry. Look, I'm sorry the live conversation wasn't very. It started off badly. I have to admit his screen name pissed me off. I mean, he sent to me an email with his like I said, his nickname was some sort of Jew shit, and I just hate that crap. So it did start off poorly, but I would appreciate it, people who are willing to defend quantum mechanics and relativity, as long as they don't have to keep putting words in my mouth and lying, basically just keep saying I said something I didn't say, and keep pretending that they can just take half a sentence and quote mine me and shit and call that a fair argument. I mean, I'm not going to be quote mined. I'm not going to be straw manned in my own room. So I ask questions, you should answer the questions, not evade the questions, that kind of thing. And he obviously just kept evading the question. It was a simple question. Why does Huygens do one thing in the single slit, and why does it do something different when there's two slits? If it's a principle. Why does Huygens change? If I have a single slit over here, a single slit way over here, right? And he wouldn't let me finish this point. We know it's making two waves over here, and we know it's making two waves over here. But then all of a sudden, when I bring them closer and closer together, all of a sudden, the single slits stop making two waves and now only make one wave. How do they know how to do that? How do the photons know that they're not supposed to Huygens when the slits are close together? How do they know that? Those little fuckers. And again, just as a context, as I've argued for the whole 7 years I've been arguing this shit or whatever it is, I've always been arguing the same point, that the real problem here is that they've given all the power in the universe to the photon, the simplest, dumbest thing that could exist, the lightest, smallest, simplest functioned thing. And they put all of the fancy behavior on that, and they totally ignore the rest of the universe as having any impact at all. It's like all the matter bits are doing absolutely nothing, and only the photons have all of the magic powers. Is what gay porn? I mean, I probably have some gay porn around. I mean, everything I do is a little bit gay porny, but, I don't know what that means. Is that gay porn? Oh, down there. Oh, there's somebody in the room. Oh, I didn't see that little sneaker. Very clever little sneaker got in here. I don't know how they do that. I don't know who's, I don't know. I don't know why YouTube lets people do that. But yes, apparently it was some sort of porn. I don't know whether it was gay or not. Too small for me to see. But good catch. Thank you. Magic photons. They can be waves, they can be virtual, and they can fart rainbow glitter. Well, I don't know if you need that extra bit, but it's really bad that they have all of these features, and any rational description just kind of has to concede that 99.99% of the time they look like the smallest, dumbest thing in the universe. And it's kind of amazing that, when the pressure's on, all of a sudden they can do all kinds of magical things. I will now contemplate the Lego universe you proposed before. I didn't really propose a Lego universe. I just was saying that obviously square geometry can fit better than round geometry. I'm certainly under the impression that it's sphere blobs all the way down, because spheres are more pressure efficient on a large scale, most pressure efficient. Well, I'm just saying there, obviously things go spherical when you have enough mass, with gravity. And that's a big a big obvious look. When things get big, they go round, but you clearly see asteroids that aren't round. So we know that there's a certain threshold. You have to be a certain amount of mass before you can crush all of the atoms and force them to go round. So, that's a real phenomenon. But I would argue there's no reason to believe that all the little bits are living a life that complicated. That they're made of a tiny, zillions of tiny little bits, and that those little bits are all being pressurized, blah, 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 blah. There's no reason to believe that it's whatever little bits all the way down. We can sort of say the little bit stops with the photon. And clearly electrons aren't like, there's clearly no relationship like a photon is an asteroid and an electron is an Earth. Clearly, photons have the capacity to move electrons. And so their size difference can't be that insanely disproportionate. So there's no reason to think they go spherical. No reason to assume it's the default. And there is some logical reason, in my opinion, to assume square as the default or cube as the default. The geometry, the evolution of geometry would go from line to square, to cube. And it wouldn't be till much later you get into round. With energy, though, it seems to move in distinct distances at a uniform rate of transfer across the checkerboard. But equilibrium could cause this too. I don't even know what that means. With energy, though, it seems to move in distinct distances at uniform rate of transfer. Well, I mean, obviously the speed of light is the uniform rate of transfer. And clearly the matter bits don't move the speed of light. So they have to collect checkers. So I don't know what this equilibrium thing is, and it doesn't really matter, because even if it wasn't in equilibrium, the whole universe was moving in some direction, we couldn't detect it. I mean, at least not with the instruments we have, we can't detect it. And we're obviously not moving fast enough for the photons to go crooked. So it's obviously whatever speed the whole universe is moving, it's not fast enough to show us the speed. So sometimes I think superior mind doesn't quite see this as clearly as I do. He says some things that just, it's not quite getting it. Is it well summarized by smallest possible distance in all three dimensions? I don't think you need to bother with the dimensions, frankly. I would argue the photon exists in one dimension. It only has dimensionality in the dimension it's moving. That's it. It doesn't exist in any other dimension. It only has mass in the one dimension it's moving. It only has reality in the dimension it's moving. You can only cause effects in the dimension it's moving. You can't affect the dimensions it's not moving in. You can only affect things in the dimension it's moving in. The slit pattern gets created by photons bouncing between the electrons. in the walls at the frequency determine the distance of the gap. Well, whatever, something like that. But anyway, the slit pattern gets created by photons bouncing between the electrons. I'd be careful about between electrons. I mean, they're obviously hitting an electron. The electron moves, readjusts its position, and essentially releases a new photon. So I don't think the photon actually changes its direction. I think in all interactions with electrons, the electron absorbs the energy of the photon and it readmits a new piece of photon. Has she ever heard of Jesus, the pregnant woman killer? I don't know what that means. Who are you talking to, weirdo? Jesse Lopez. Oh, there's more porn. Strange. I don't know how it gets in here. Really don't. I mean, it really shouldn't be able to get in here. I mean, it's completely YouTube's fault, so they should get punished for it. You know. I mean, maybe the little, whatever he is, the little physicist is doing it. I don't know. Gary, it's back. Oh, okay. You're letting me know. Thank you. If you move your cam over, you should cover it. Well, yes, I didn't realize it was there. All right. So it's time to go, I think. It's a not entirely unproductive evening, but it's pretty strange. But better than nothing. That's all I'll say. Better than nothing. Yeah, 3:47. Way too late. All right. So till the next time. Yeah, we'll have to talk like Thursday or Friday there, NS. So you have to prepare. See, I disagree there. I think everything in 3D space needs width and depth as well as length. Why? Why does it need it? I'll wait for your answer. Why? Why? I'm just saying the universe is obviously made out of something that's probably what? It's just a something, the generic something bit that moves the speed of light. I'm just saying, why would I assume that the something bit that moves the speed of light has to have any kind of shape at all or be anything but a little something bit that moves the speed of light? I'm just saying, why do I have to give it any physical form at all? Besides recognizing that it clearly has an impact in the one dimension it's heading in, and it doesn't have an impact in any other. I mean, if it has a width and a depth and a length, you could argue that you could throw rocks at it from the side and affect it, and you can't. You can't shoot light at light and bend light with light. You can't move light with hitting it with light. So I mean, it's kind of obvious that it doesn't have any length, or you could hit it. you know, but who cares? I mean, I don't really know. It's not an important thing to discuss or argue about, I suppose. I'm just saying, I think for the purpose of really understanding physics, is to understand that the matter bits are the three-dimensional bits, the force bits are one-dimensional. And that's a huge difference between them. And you can understand, now I understand why force bits can go the speed of light, but matter bits can't, because matter bits are dragging around stuff moving in the wrong dimensions. You can only go the speed of light if you're moving in one dimension. If you're moving in three dimensions, you have no chance of going the speed of light. I don't know why you're talking about Jesus, but I think we're done with you, Jesse. Let's see, Jesus, the clone of the baby killer Jehovah, created everything. Yeah, I don't know why you're typing this kind of rubbish, so I'll just get rid of you. Doesn't seem to be a reasonable comment in any context. How can they say that Schrodinger equation collapses? How the fuck does an equation collapse? Well, it collapses when it goes to infinity, usually. But whatever. No explanation ever. Does anybody here realize that a diffraction gradient makes separate beams diverge away from each other? Separate beams? Diverge away from each other? What are you even talking about? I mean, everybody understands, right, that the pattern is made out of millions and billions of photons, not one photon, and that individual photons took a different path to get to the different locations. Everybody understands that, right? Not make each beam diverge itself. Anybody realize that? Again, you're the one who doesn't seem to understand how to answer questions, so I don't know why you expect to have answers to your questions when you don't sit there and answer any questions. It splits the beam into separate beams and diverges them away from each other. Again, it doesn't diverge them. You're basically reflecting them to different locations. So one's getting reflected and one's not. Everybody understands that. The beam splitter is at an angle. You're splitting one beam and you're letting one beam pass through. And then you're taking the beam that passed through and then you're reflecting it back through, this way. And you're reflecting this one back through. So one beam went this distance, one beam went this distance. One was diverging this long distance, one was diverging only this short distance here. Big difference. Why do I even have to clarify that? There's nothing to clarify. This is a straw man now. You're just making straw man arguments. No one's arguing that the beam splitter doesn't cause one beam to go left and one beam to go straight. Everybody knows that. So it's just straw man bullshit. Do you think they can actually shoot individual photons? Well, they obviously don't shoot them. They attempt to mask for them. But the idea of what an individual photon is a tricky bit of phraseology because it could be 7 quanta of light. It could be 3 quanta of light. A photon is just defined by us receiving clumps at a frequency. And how much clump, how many clumps there are, is a separate question from finding a hunk of light. I'm actually talking about your diffraction grading film thing. It doesn't matter. The point is that the light going through the diffraction gradient, the individual photons have a higher probability of spreading. The smaller you make the openings, the more the light spreads. That's perfectly consistent with a diffraction gradient. The argument is that they don't make beam splitters with mirrored surfaces with gigantic gaps between mirror and no mirror, and then mirror and no mirror. There's tiny gaps. Tiny gaps mean you've created a single slit diffraction opportunity. Fact. Tendency, I don't like that. Forces, so I don't know. Tendency is a silly word to have in this conversation. I can take out of this since they are akin to vectors. Virtual, I don't know what that even means. Yeah, I don't care for that. Otherwise, I'd call it something else than one-dimensional. Well, I don't care what you would do. It makes perfect sense to me, so fuck you. Clearly, the other dimensions are irrelevant in the case of a photon. If it has any dimensionality, the dimensionality is irrelevant. It has no effect. It means absolutely nothing. So why are you obsessing about it, you fucking cunt? Otherwise, I'd call it something else than one-dimensional. Can a photon from the exact opposite side cancel the photon? No. Photons don't interact with photons. Force doesn't interact with force. The force created in charge does not interact with the other force created in a charge. The two charges, the forces created by a charge, do not interact with each other. The force has to reach the matter bit to cause an effect. So if there's two charges sitting here, they don't bounce off each other's force fields. The force from one has to actually reach the matter of the other, and the force from the other has to reach the matter. Force doesn't interact with force in any visible way because it's purely kinetic. So even if it did, you couldn't see it. I mean, I've done this so many times. I really hate having to do it over and over. I mean, if I have two kinetic balls and they hit each other and they reflect, I couldn't realistically see the difference between two balls that miss each other and two balls that hit each other. Because it would be one ball leaving, one ball leaving. That's all there ever will be. One leaves, one leaves. It's invisible. It doesn't change the universe at all if they hit or don't hit. Whatever. The film thingy you can find when you search. Bell's theorem of quantum Venn diagram paradox. Whatever. What are you even talking? You're not even on the subject, for fuck's sake. What does that have to do with whether or not a half-silvered mirror diverges light? Shit. Another useless question. Why don't you actually buy a beam splitter from a website instead of using home objects? I think what I've done is research the subject. I think I found out things I wouldn't have found if I didn't buy one. But frankly, I don't have to buy a half-silvered mirror. I can make a half-silvered mirror. Um, and again, logically, when you glue two prisms together, you're creating a layer between two surfaces. And those layers change the reflective index of the light. So clearly, gluing two prisms together isn't logically any better than creating dirty glass. So again, you explain to me how it creates a mechanism that creates two equal beams of light. I'm saying I see no theory. I see no web page that explains how the light goes in and how the two beams that come out are identical. I've seen no diagram of how that takes place. How you bent one beam and you let one beam go straight and the two beams actually come out exactly the same. They didn't go through a different obstacle course. They weren't differently manipulated. One wasn't absorbed or reflected, when in fact that's what had to happen. So where have you explained any of that? And what I have shown is websites that do point out internal reflections and point out how how dirt on a piece of glass will create the pattern. So, I mean, again, you're just denying the evidence I've pointed to and I've shown. It has nothing to do with the mirror. I don't know what that means. Other chatters have talked about a film which, upon rotation relative to another same film, this is polarization films. I've already done videos on that, a completely different subject. Polarization films change the photons that go through them. This is not a paradox. It's not even complicated. The film is essentially a bunch of bars. You could think of it that way. And the light either is polarized in the sense that the photons are lined up in such a way that they can go through the bars, or they're lined up in a way that they can't get through the bars. So depending on where you turn the bars, certain photons will get through and certain photons won't. And the key is that ones that are a little bit off, like if I throw a frisbee a little crooked through jail bars, the crooked frisbees will make it sometimes because they'll kind of bend by the bars. So light that's not the same polarization gets through the bars and gets bent. So all the light that goes through the bars, if it's a little bit off, it gets straightened. So all of it ends up being the exact same polarization. So the film changes the light. That's why when you stick a third film in, you're really gaining more light, because with each change, the more you put, if you put 10 filters in and change them all just a little bit, you'll get 20% more light in the finished product. So even though you put more filters in, you'll get more light, because each time you're catching ones that are a little bit off and bending them slowly. You're bending them all to the other polarization. So I've already done this. So this has nothing to do with Bell's inequality. It has nothing. The polarization films do not detect polarization. They cause polarization. Well, they not only detect it, but they cause it. They interfere. They're not a pure test instrument. They're fucking with the thing they're testing. All right, now I really got to go. It's 4 o'clock, for fuck's sake. Anyway, so thanks for the participation. You people really are all crazy mostly. And Jesus, the things you say, I just don't get it. Anyway, till the next time and such.